now this.
Meantime, Brian, there's some unconfirmed reports. We spoke about chilling reports of what's been going on in the cockpits, what was at the time. One report from a controller in New Hampshire who says that a pilot in that first flight that was hijacked, the American airliner out of Logan, that the pilot had his finger down on the microphone and would key it in the open position, and that the controller believes he heard one of the hijackers say in English, "Don't do anything foolish," speaking to the pilot. Then the microphone went dead and the transponder went off. That's equipment in the cockpit that sends a signal to radar. So what the controllers would have been left with is able to see the blip as it headed down to New York out of its intended route and toward the World Trade Center, but they would not have been able to tell the altitude because that transponder was off. There are also some cell phone calls from relatives on the plane, one from Barbara Olson, the wife of the Solicitor General Theodore Olson, who was on one of the fatal flights. She called her husband twice before the plane went down, and she said the terrorists had knife-like instruments. There was another relative who got off a call on the cell phone that said in that flight they had been herded in back and the pilot was in back with them, so evidently the terrorists had taken over the controls of the aircraft. One day we may know more about all this if the cockpit voice recorders survived those fiery crashes, because they would have an actual audio recording of just what was being overheard being said in the cockpits. Brian?
Bob, a quick question. Someone said that they chose to hijack 757s and 767s because while the planes aren't identical, one's a wide body, one's a single aisle, they are both by Boeing, both twin engine, and have similar flight decks. Learn how to fly one, you can probably fly the other. Any truth to that?
Well, that is true, that they do indeed have very similar flight decks, and so if you were training terrorists from abroad to take over the controls of these planes, and as we've said, it does appear that they did take over the controls, there might be some advantage in choosing those two models. They also, it's been pointed out, chose all flights that were going to the West Coast, because we had 3 bound for Los Angeles and 1 for San Francisco.
Full of fuel.
So that might be an obvious reason, because they'd be fully loaded with fuel and therefore make a much more explosive kind of bomb as they hit their intended targets.
Robert Hager. Bob, thanks for your superb coverage throughout this day today. Howard Fineman of Newsweek magazine and NBC News with us from Washington tonight. Howard, this president, new in his term, has been handed an unspeakable tragedy, perhaps the largest crisis any president, American president, has faced since FDR. Tell us what you know about how this White House has handled this day no one wanted.
Well, they handled it not by coming directly back to Washington, and that created some concern up on Capitol Hill. After the Hill was evacuated, Brian, about 70 senators met in the Capitol Hill police station a few blocks from the White House. From the Capitol. They met at 5 o'clock this afternoon when it wasn't clear that the president was coming back, let alone that he was going to speak to the nation. And my sources tell me that it was an angry, even tumultuous meeting at times, with both Republicans and Democrats saying the country needs to hear from the president. As it turned out, around that time, the president was preparing to leave Omaha to come back here, but it wasn't until a couple of hours ago that we knew for sure that he was going to address the nation. And everyone I talked to here today and around the country, politicians big and small, all said that the #1 priority for the president is to show himself in command and control in the White House, and to reassure the nation, which of course the president is about to do. But for a few hours this afternoon, there were a lot of concerns, both among Republicans and Democrats, about just where he was and what he was going to say.
Luckily, if I'm allowed a moment of unabashed patriotism, this is a great country, and one of the great things about it is the almost uniquely American urge to rally around the chief executive without regard to party when things get rough for this country. And Howard, have you any reason to believe that won't happen this time?
I'm sure that it will, Brian, and that's the point that the senators were making in private. They wanted him to be literally and figuratively the rallying flag, to show himself, to be the leader, to be the commander-in-chief and the symbol of the country, and to do it visibly and to do it quickly. And that, of course, is what the president is going to do. And I've been around here for now a long time, Brian, and I have never seen a sight or heard one quite like the members of Congress spontaneously on the steps of a Capitol breaking out in song in honor of this country. And that's a deep emotional bond. You saw Senator Trent Lott leaning over to embrace the Democrat Barbara Mikulski. You saw the people spontaneously expressing their love of country and their concern and hope and dedication to the country, and that's the kind of wellspring of emotion that the senators meeting privately today wanted the president to tap, and I think he will tap into tonight. But to call this a defining moment both for him and the country is an understatement. But right now the measurements are not of George Bush per se. They're of the presidency and our ability to come together as a country.
It was an incredible moment on the Hill tonight. The leadership, both parties coming together, followed by an impromptu singing of God Bless America. And to our viewers, we will re-rack that tape and have it for you in the hours as our coverage continues here. And Howard Fineman, I know you're going to be available to us, and thank you for coming on, for your contributions. We are coming up to the bottom of the hour here tonight, which means that in about 2 minutes' time, from the Oval Office, President George W. Bush will address the nation. We know a few things about what is planned here tonight. We know he is scheduled to talk for roughly 4 to 5 minutes, and we know that the planning was to focus mostly on what is the real tragedy across this country tonight, and that is the victims, those who were killed, and unspeakable numbers of victims. There is so much we still don't know tonight about things like the death toll. Let us take just a moment here. We're a minute away from the president and show you what happened on Capitol Hill tonight.
And there I look, stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies to the ocean white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home.
That is how it happened tonight on Capitol Hill, an impromptu singing after an emotional moment. The president is waiting for the cue in the Oval Office after a long day. Here now, the President of the United States.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington which had to be evacuated today are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you, good night, and God bless America.
President Bush, after an unspeakably horrible day across this country, especially in the metropolitan centers of New York and Washington, where columns of smoke still rise, the president trying to reassure a shaky nation tonight from the Oval Office of the United States with an interesting and pointed comment tonight saying the United States will make no distinction between terrorists who commit these acts and those who harbor them. President choosing his words very carefully. There is no presidential biography or guidebook to guide him. This has never happened to any member of that elite club, any of the men who have served as this nation's chief executive. This is uncharted territory, not only for this president, still in the first year of his term, but for the Americans who were shaken by today's terrorist attacks. We are joined by Chris Matthews, the host of Hardball tonight, and again by Howard Fineman to go over what they just heard and what we have seen here all day long. Chris, again, an unspeakably horrible day. No president ever wants this kind of thing dumped in his lap. This president now has. What next?
Well, it's been compared to Pearl Harbor, and the problem that the president faces is that he doesn't have a clear-cut enemy, as Roosevelt faced after December 7th of 1941, that day of infamy. This time around, they're faceless. He can call them cowards, but they're certainly not cowards, these people who flew those planes into the building, into the Twin Towers. The problem is where you got to in that language, you go after the people who harbor them as well as the terrorists themselves, but does that bring you into attacking a whole community? For example, the Islamic fundamentalists across the Mideast. Who is your enemy? The people that were cheering today on the West Bank and in Gaza, are they your enemy? Or just the criminals themselves, the ones who did the logistics work, who may have paid the bribes, the ones who came up with the money, are they the enemy? The problem here for this president is, how do you find victory if you can't find the enemy? And if you can't associate, if you can't find the actual enemy, do you go off and just bomb some people who are associated with them, those who harbor them? And then the world will say, you're wagging the dog. You're going after people who may not have committed any criminal act simply because you disagree with their politics. It's a very tough conundrum for this president. It was easier for Roosevelt. He simply had to send the U.S. Navy and the military forces to regain those islands in the Pacific and island hop their way back to the home islands of Japan. This time around, that route is not so clear.
Chris, it was said earlier today that when you get away from the horrific initial sadness, the fact that there are families in New York and Washington and elsewhere with an empty place at the dinner table tonight, when you get over that, the worst part of this is how well it was organized,
right.
How someone was able to plan this down to the minute under everyone's nose.
And the use of the weaponry, perhaps it's knives, we've heard, that were used to subdue the air stewards and to reach the pilots and to take control of the planes. You know, there's a person missing from our table tonight, and that's Barbara Olson, who's been on our programs, yours and mine, so many times. And she was on one of those planes that was, God, imagine her last moments. It was unbelievable in personal terms. But I think this president has a lot to stand up to. He has to find a mission for the American people. This is not going to be a good detective story for us to find out who the actual people are who did this. I think the American people want a larger role, and I think this president has to find it for them. So far, they're giving blood, and the members of both houses from both parties are singing together. But I think the American people are much more muscular people than that, and they want to know what they should do about this. And they can't go to the recruiting stands. So what do they do? And I think that's another problem for this president. He has to find a way to unleash the American spirit to get these people. And that could be a larger target or a smaller target. But my hunch is, based upon his words tonight, and I think you heard them the way I did, it's going to be a larger target. It's not just going to be the guys who drew up the logistics. It's going to be the people behind them, as the president put it.
That's certainly what I heard. And Howard, as Chris referenced, back in '41, the American anger, you could see it in the lines of young men lining up in Times Square who were elbowing each other out of the way for the honor of signing up first to volunteer to go get them. How will that anger manifest itself this time against a so far unknown enemy?
Well, this is a different world and a different war, Brian, and this is a war of terrorism that's ongoing, that's part of the environment, that's part of our very lives. The question for the president is how to focus it. I think it'll be focused by what our armed forces do. And I was told this evening that several senators have been briefed by high government officials on what they know. And what they know is they feel they have a pretty good idea, not 100%, but a pretty good idea, at least as of 7 or 8 o'clock tonight, as to who the perpetrators are, where they are, and who's harboring them. So I think the way the American people will express their anger and their focus is through the men and women of the military. And I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later. I thought perhaps the president would be more specific tonight, but I think he wants to be 100% sure that he knows the targets that he's facing, and he knows the countries or peoples that are harboring these terrorists. And I think that's the next thing to happen. One other thing I'd like to mention, Brian, I just got a call from Karl Rove, the political advisor and close friend of the president. He says that there were indeed credible security threats and concerns that kept the president out of Washington, D.C. until late this afternoon. But that in fact the president and his entourage had decided by about 1 o'clock, I think Central Time, to begin heading back. Ironically, that meeting I told you about earlier, where the members of the Senate were concerned about the president's whereabouts, was taking place after, according to Rove, the president had decided to return. But I wanted to underline what he said to me, which is that there were indeed what they and security people felt were credible threats against the President of the United States that kept him out of the airspace and the ground here inside the District of Columbia.
That had been our hunch in the late afternoon.
Well, that's the hunch, but he's saying it on the record,
right.
And I think that's crucial.
Right, it is, and it's also rare for...
That's part of the damage, Brian. Part of the damage here is the President of the United States was kept from his capital. This may be the first time since James Madison, an American president, has had to make clear of the capital. And it's serious business. I think it's going to hurt the country's self-image to know that its president couldn't come to the White House, couldn't come to Washington. I think it's part of the damage today.
Remember, there was the time in '63 when there was some debate over whether or not to bring LBJ back, and they decided to make a statement by flying back home that night, as George W. Bush did today. As we've been talking, Chris, we've looked at the first tape pictures coming in of the damage at the Pentagon. It's the first up-close view we've gotten today. Chris, how many times today have you kind of stopped yourself after this non-stop coverage and said, my God, they got the Pentagon?
Well, yeah, because you're making the statement in the question, which is this is the most secure target in the country. This is the most difficult to reach spot. And what we've learned today is if you can hijack a plane, you can get anywhere in the States. They could have gone after the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, the Liberty Bell. They could have gone after the White House. What would have stopped them today? I think that's another question. I think we're going to live in a state which has much less freedom than we had before today. The president said we're fighting for freedom against the enemies of freedom. But the fact is, we've already seen we've lost freedom. You or I can't drive by the White House anymore and wave or honk our horns like we used to do in the old days. The American people don't have that freedom to go to the Capitol. When I first came to Washington, any American, anybody in the world could walk up to their congressman and to their office and say hi without going through any kind of metal detectors or x-rays or anything. Today, it's like going from East and West Berlin. We have lost our freedom because of these terrorists.
Howard Fineman, the American people have such an enormous potential well of goodwill, especially during times like this. They are ready to envelop George W. Bush. They would envelop whoever the chief executive was right now, and I guess the next 24 hours where the feelings of the kind of the frayed nerves of the American people really become crucial.
Well, and I think that's a job that the president has in addition to commander-in-chief. There's a royal almost aspect to being president, a symbolic aspect. The president has to be visible. He has to be willing to be embraced emotionally. He has to be willing to tap into the deep wells of collective emotion that we have in this democracy. That's what Bill Clinton, for all his faults, was very good at, and what he did so well after the Oklahoma City bombing. George Bush is not a man who likes spectacle. He's actually, in many surprising ways, a private man. But he's got to make himself public. He's got to be seen. He's got to be understood, and he's got to be looked at and identified with by the American people. And I think there are people around him, Karl Rove among him, who are telling him just that. A 5-minute, eloquent, short speech, firm in its resolve, with references to God and the Bible, are great. But that's just the beginning of the emotional involvement the president has to have as a leader in what is essentially a new kind of wartime in this country.
Howard Fineman, Chris Matthews, gentlemen, tough night. Thank you very much for coming on. As I mentioned, we've been watching these first close-up views of the Pentagon. These pictures obviously taken earlier today. This fresh video from later this afternoon, that control tower looking item in the foreground actually is. This happened right near the helipad there on that side of the Pentagon. No one thought it was unusual to hear aircraft noise per se on that side of the building, but then to realize it was a passenger jet aircraft of its enormous size, then to realize what had happened was a different thing entirely. Veteran NBC News correspondent John Palmer is there at the Pentagon for us tonight. John, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. Hundreds of firefighters are now in the 11th hour of their battle to try to contain this blaze at the west side of the Pentagon, where the hijacked jetliner crashed into the side of the building at about 9:30 this morning. You could look over my shoulder here and see a couple of fires. Blazes have broken through the roof of the Pentagon. From time to time, the last 4 or 5 hours, we have seen these flares. The plane hit the outer ring. There are 5 rings at the Pentagon, and it penetrated 3 of those. And Governor Jim Gilmore of Virginia was here just a short time ago. He said that he has been to that spot, and he said it is now penetrated into the 4th ring. So it's very difficult, as you can imagine. It's not just one building. These are separated rings, and the fires have moved into 3 and 4 of those rings. There are 5 altogether. The governor had something very interesting to say, in that when he went over there, he said, I was looking for the pit, for the hole, for the depression in the ground where that American airliner went down. But he said there was no depression in the ground. The plane went right into the side of the building. And he said there was a fire hydrant right in front by the helicopter pad, right where the plane went down. And he said it was still standing, untouched. So the plane never hit the ground. On the fly, it went right into the building. And just over to the left, we could see earlier today, you can't see see them tonight because it's dark, but there was a tree with all of the leaves and branches sheared off squarely at the top, showing that the plane was coming in quite low at about 1,000 feet, and then it banked and crashed right into the side of the Pentagon there. Most of the people inside the Pentagon were, like many Americans, glued to their television sets, watching the unfolding tragedy there of the World Trade Centers in New York City, and then they heard a crash, a thud, smoke filled the hallways of the Pentagon, a general alarm was sounded, and then everybody fled the building and went out into the parking lots, and the Secretary of Defense himself was in his office, and as he explained earlier tonight, he immediately went to the other side of the Pentagon and indeed took part personally in trying to help some of those people who had been so badly burned. As far as casualties are concerned, the Pentagon is giving no figures tonight whatsoever. The Secretary of Defense, though, did say that the number of casualties is going to be high. The number, he said, will not be a few. And he mentioned, of course, the jetliner with those people aboard had no chance whatsoever. They're trying to wet down the areas now that have been contained. It's terribly hot in there still. They have search dogs, cadaver dogs. Many volunteers and rescue units now are going through the debris, searching, hoping to find somebody alive. But certainly scores have died, scores have been injured here. The building bathed in searchlights tonight, and the search and the rescue will go on throughout the night and well into tomorrow for sure. Brian?
It's a sad night at the Department of Defense and the venerable Pentagon building just over the line in Virginia. And John Palmer, thank you very much for that. She has done an extraordinary job covering this story all during this day from Lower Manhattan. And we are going back to Ashley Banfield now by telephone. I understand she's in an NYPD police cruiser because she's heading into where the central damage is. Ashley, can you hear us?
Yeah, Brian, I'm in the back of one of the NYPD vehicles, and we've just been driving through the inside the perimeter. We've driven to within a block of the demolition site of the second World Trade Tower. There were only 2 stories of rubble that were visible. I don't know how to describe this to you, but if I could say it was like driving through a movie set, that might be the only description that might be fitting at this point. It's pitch black.
Right now, they're just coordinating the rescue effort. They're trying to get all the people, whoever's still left alive out there.
Are they finding anyone alive?
Yes, they just, as far as I know, they just found a couple of police officers unconscious at the base of what used to be the towers.
What about the dead? I understand they've set up a temporary morgue down there.
Yes, down at Vesey and West Street, they have a temporary morgue, and they're, reclaiming as many bodies as they can out on the perimeter.
Talking to some of the people who've come out tonight, they said one of the problems has been is that the fires continue to burn, and they've had trouble trying to get in there to do any kind of rescue effort. What have you seen? Do they have those fires under control now?
I think now the fire department has them under control or out at this time, but it's still red hot, and that's hampering the rescue effort.
Is it organized down there? Is it a sense of chaos? Because I understand that there have been a lot of firefighters lost tonight, so the losses are it's not only the magnitude, but they're also personal.
Yes, everybody's deeply upset. It's a horrific thing. But we were down earlier, down with the firemen, down at the scene when the building 7 collapsed, and they're just trying to pour water on it, put it out from a distance. But now they're trying to get in there and see if anybody's left alive in the rubble.
Mm-hmm. Your thoughts as you walked out tonight?
I tell you, I don't even know what to say. Just pray for the families, and there's thousands of people dead. It's horrific.
Sergeant Ralph Lowe, thank you very much. You've been very patient. Thank you. Brian, throughout the night, we have seen ambulances from as far away as Passaic County, New Jersey, fire trucks and ambulances from Norwalk, Connecticut, from the far reaches of Long Island come down here to try to go in there and to try to do any kind of rescue effort. Throughout the night, we have also seen trucks with lights, big lights, light up the area so they can continue to work through the night. We've also seen busloads of more New York firefighters go through, but they have suffered a tremendous loss tonight. tonight. As you know, one estimate, 200 firefighters died today, 200 firefighters from New York City. One of them, their fire chaplain, a Franciscan priest who worked in the area, who presided over many funerals of firefighters killed in action. Now his fellow priests are considering tonight how they will lay him to rest. Brian?
Ann Thompson, thank you. Much of that apparatus appears like it's coming off the surface of the moon. It is an incredible backdrop there in Lower Manhattan tonight. Ann was there throughout the day. We mentioned she was in the area for the initial crash, as was our good friend and CNBC anchor Ron Insana, who was interviewed today immediately following the blast and stayed with the story. And Ron, let's begin with that and your story before we get anywhere near the actual business of the markets, which you usually cover. And we'll start with that. How are you, buddy?
Well, fortunately, I'm doing quite well. Thank you for asking, Brian. It was a harrowing experience. I was actually en route to the Trade Center after having learned about the planes flying into the two buildings. I was at a business breakfast in Midtown Manhattan, and I got down there, I would say, probably in the neighborhood of 9:30 or so. Actually met up with an MSNBC cameraman on the street, and we were attempting to work our way from the east side of the World Trade Center to the west side, where we knew some colleagues and trucks and correspondents would be stationed. And as we moved toward the building, and I suspect we were within, I would imagine, 1.5 to 2 blocks of the Trade Center to the east and 1 or 2 blocks south, we looked up and the big building began to blow out from the top. And we turned and ran as the debris began falling, Brian. And John, the cameraman from NBC, who went straight down the street. I made a right, hoping that this cloud that was following us down the street would be stopped by the buildings that would be adjacent to me. That was not the case. It was a scene out of the Independence Day where these huge black clouds filled the streets until the air around me was totally black. I ducked behind a car, and as the debris continued to fall, reached up to see if the car was unlocked. It was, and I got in. I could not see outside the car for several minutes. As small amounts of light began to work through the blackness, I made it into a building that was in front of the car, where there were a couple of policemen and some others who either worked there or were taking refuge there. And we eventually made our way to a police truck and began the trek back to Midtown Manhattan.
And Ron, you became one of the many stories walking around the city, and unlike most people who had cell phones that were useless, were looking for a phone, at least your wife Melinda could see you on television to know you were okay. A lot of people didn't have that luxury.
I did manage to get a hold of her on the telephone as I was working my way up Midtown. Once I got out of the police truck at about 34th Street and 2nd Avenue, there was a moment where I was able to make a successful phone call. Now, my family back in Los Angeles learned of my predicament after 3 hours of wondering as I got on the set with Tom Brokaw and Matt Lauer and Katie Couric. Fortunately, they realized I was all right, despite the concern over my appearance at the time, where I was covered completely in debris.
You and everybody else down
Absolutely.
in Lower Manhattan. Now, Ron, let's talk about the business side. Markets closed tomorrow. Banks open. Things like ATMs, infrastructure, everything else up and running?
As far as we know, I mean, certainly in the surrounding area, that is not the case. What was hit today, and we talked about this earlier, Tim Russert was talking about how this attack was designed to have maximum impact, both in terms of the political consequences and in terms of loss of life, which is the greatest tragedy of all. It was also designed to have an immense financial impact, at least in the short run. The World Trade Center is, in many ways, the nerve center of the financial community in Lower Manhattan. There are brokerage firms, Morgan Stanley, the biggest tenant in the two buildings. There are other smaller brokerage firms. There was one exchange which trades gold and silver, traded gold and silver, also housed there. And so many other Wall Street processes are taken care of in the World Trade Center and also in 7 World Trade Center, where, of course, some regulatory staff were housed as well. Those people mercifully are safe, but the building is gone. So the question about how trades settle and are cleared, questions about financial transactions and the wiring of money are still open. The U.S. government is suggesting that the settlement process or the mechanics of the market will work fine. The Federal Reserve saying it will provide enough money to keep the system stable. All that being said, today we should point out the overseas markets are down rather hard, Brian. At one time, the Nikkei in Japan was down in excess of 6%, falling below the level of the Dow this evening for the first time since 1957. So we see at the moment about 6% losses throughout Asia, from Shanghai to Tokyo to Sydney, Australia.
And Ron, as we're going to look at some videotape of your travails earlier today, I have to ask you, there must be concern about members of the financial community that people may know are missing. I mean, our family knows of 2 people who haven't checked in, and there's great worry tonight if you're a New Yorker and have any ties at all to folks who work down there.
Absolutely, Brian, and you know, all of us at CNBC, I mean, first off, you know, extend our heartfelt sympathies to the victims' families. We know that we've lost friends. We just don't know who. It is impossible to ascertain that information right now. These are 2 buildings that housed upwards of 20,000 people at well-known firms, like I said, Morgan Stanley, Cantor Fitzgerald. Lehman Brothers had 2 floors of the World Trade Center. We all know folks who work in all those institutions, and as I said, we don't know what the damage is, who the fatalities are, but it is, for an environment that we've become so accustomed to seeing day in and day out, to driving by the World Trade Center, it is unthinkable that area, which has become an integral part of my life, is no longer there.
And Ron, we're glad you're okay.
Thank you.
On this side of it, and thank you very much for coming on tonight.
Thank you, Brian.
So much of this conversation today has centered around what happened, what broke down in the security blanket that surrounds, or is supposed to surround, air travel in this country. What happened that led to the hijacking of 4 commercial aircraft, saying nothing of the crash of all of them, their use as flying bombs loaded with fuel prior to transcontinental flights, using all those lives on board as kind of flying human weapons. We have invited Mary Schiavo on tonight, former Inspector General of the Department of Transportation.
Inadequacies have been warned to the government. When I was Inspector General, we did 2 major investigations. It has been repeated since then, and these weaknesses were known, but it was considered to be an acceptable risk to the government. The government believed it would be too expensive to close these loopholes, and because there had not previously been a domestic terrorist attack on aviation facilities, they considered the risk very low. So they knew about the risk, and they accepted the risk, and it was a very, very grievous error.
How does life change in this country now, Mary? And I'm thinking specifically of, let's pick a holiday, the millions of Americans who are going to have their next flight over the Thanksgiving break.
Well, flight in America has to change because, remember, for 10 years we treated domestic flights very differently from international flights on the false assumption that they were not at risk. That was not true. There were many, many warnings to the government. So now we're going to have to treat domestic flights like international flights, meaning that everyone will have to be more closely screened. But more importantly, no longer will we just look at passengers as terrorists or potential criminal threats. Now it's more likely the passengers will be looking at the airport and airline personnel and other passengers and people within the airport as a threat. So we will expect full field background investigations of all people working in secure positions. We will expect to know who our screeners are. In many cases, not only they're not citizens, they can be foreign guest workers, etc. We'll want to know who's doing our screening and who works at the airport. And by the way, it does not have to shut down the system. We will have to make a major investment, though, to keep the system working.
Every day, just to live in this country, we take on a certain amount of risk. It's often said that once you finish your drive to work, the most dangerous part of your day is over, and it's nothing compared to the chances of being killed in air travel. What's the chance that Americans decide they're only going to put up with so many inconveniences to travel by air, and that they decide how much is too much?
Well, this event has changed probably everyone's mind. 4 flights, you know, on a nice clear day, seemingly not really at random, but it could have been anyone. I think this is America's line in the sand. We have tolerated so much from our government, really, you know, complacency, saying it's not a threat, and now it's here, and this will be the event that requires that. I'm not saying it will be cheap, and it certainly won't be easy, but we literally will have to have full screening of all airport personnel and very close scrutiny, because I've actually heard people say, and it's just outrageous, and they don't belong in any leadership positions, but they have actually said that, well, you know, we can't defend against this kind of attack. We have to, literally, in bringing down aviation. They have brought down the ability of the country to do business. Witness, the only thing we could do, because we have no idea of the threat out there, is to shut our aviation system. We can't do business that way, so we must fix it, and those that say we can't don't belong in government.
Mary Schiavo, thank you for coming on with us tonight, being with us for your opinions following this disastrous day for air travel in this country. We are trying to, as news organizations, exercise caution and show some judgment. After all, perhaps you remember the initial hours after the Oklahoma City bombing, when some news organizations all but blamed Arab groups, only to find out they were horribly wrong. But we have learned from senior American officials speaking on background that at the top of the list of suspects in today's attacks on U.S. targets is Osama bin Laden, the world's best-known Islamic extremist. And on almost everyone's list for likely suspect, that one name keeps appearing over and over. NBC News correspondent Keith Miller has more from London.
Osama bin Laden was last seen publicly this January at his son's wedding in Afghanistan. Rare pictures of a man who reportedly travels only at night, often in disguise, surrounded by bodyguards. He made his reputation in the 1980s, fighting the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan.
He was involved in some horrific battles, which he said later gave him a sort of tranquility and a sense of peace. And it basically made him a pretty fearless guy.
Today, the Central Intelligence Agency calls him the most immediate and serious threat to U.S. security. Bin Laden says that jihad against the United States and killing of Americans is the core of his faith. He was born into a family of wealth, power, and privilege in Saudi Arabia 44 years ago. It was during his days as a student studying economics that he turned to radical Islam. He is linked to a series of global terrorist attacks. February 1993, the bombing at the World Trade Center in New York, 6 dead, more than 1,000 injured. August 7, 1998, the simultaneous U.S. embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania, more than 200 killed. And last year, the suicide bomb attack on the USS Cole, resulting in the death of 17 American servicemen.
He alone, probably within the Islamic world, has amassed and developed a terrorist network, an international network, which would be capable of carrying out such an atrocity.
After the embassy bombing, the American government retaliated with missile strikes. The missiles damaged bin Laden's headquarters in Afghanistan, but he escaped unharmed. The U.S. has demanded that the radical Islamic government in Afghanistan hand bin Laden over to American authorities. But the Afghans have refused, despite bin Laden's declaration that all U.S. citizens are legitimate targets.
He's targeted the US because he sees America as the head of the snake, as he calls it. The body of the snake is the corrupt governments in the Middle East that he has promised to overthrow, and also Israel.
Meanwhile, his popularity in the region is reportedly increasing. Recently, an estimated 25,000 followers scattered around the world and prepared to engage in a holy war against America.
Keith Miller with that late report filed out of London for us tonight. As we continue to talk about what is ahead of investigators, there is a report tonight out of New York that there are signs of life in the rubble. That is, of course, what everyone has to join together and hope for, everyone who has been through this tragic and horrifically sad day of attacks in 2 different cities using a total of 4 hijacked commercial aircraft as almost flying bombs. Our next guest, Rick Hahn, was among the lead FBI investigators at 2 separate incidents that changed this country forever, Oklahoma City and the first World Trade Center bombing. Mr. Hahn, welcome. Good evening to you. It's been theorized that perhaps this investigation because it's so, the plot was so elaborate, timed out, involving so many aircraft, perhaps that'll make it easier to find footprints of who's behind it. Do you concur with that?
I certainly do, Brian. I think that that's the fact that it was as complex as it was would indicate that a great number of people were involved, obviously besides the individuals on board the aircraft. Those people had to communicate with the people that harbored them, the people that got them into the country, that coordinated the access to the aircraft. And all that communication hopefully will have been captured by our intelligence sources and lead us to the perpetrators of this grotesque act.
In each of the cases where an aircraft went down, all the crashes are horrible, and they ended up in a ball of flames. We're going to assume that the black boxes, as they seem to in most cases, survived. Won't they alone give us some evidence, cockpit voices, orders being called out, that kind of thing?
Well, we certainly hope so. Obviously, some of the people that were involved in these things were familiar with the aircraft. However, there's no way for the perpetrators to turn off those cockpit or data recorders. In addition to that, of course, you're going to have the records from the airport itself, the ticket sales, and who actually boarded the aircraft.
We had a travel expert on earlier who theorized these were all, we seem to know that they were all transcontinental flights. That means they were all loaded with fuel. He said, notably, they were all the first flights of the day on their routes, which meant to him that they all overnighted at the airport of origin. None of these flights was a quick turnaround from any other city. That further meant to him that perhaps cleaning, catering people, ground personnel should be given a special look.
Absolutely. That obviously getting the weapons that were described in a little bit of intelligence that we do have on board the aircraft could easily have been gotten on, and more easily, certainly, by someone that had access to that aircraft during the night.
I know this emotion isn't supposed to come into the investigating game. You've got a country of Americans today that is walking around understandably very angry. And we've said several times today, in World War II, people dealt with their anger by signing up to go fight. Everybody did. This case is different. How do you think it'll manifest itself?
Well, the anger, unfortunately, I think will go on for quite some time, in part because the process of bringing the bodies out of the World Trade Center debris is going to take probably weeks. That anger will hopefully be prevailed over by cooler heads. As somebody pointed out, Oklahoma City initially was thought to be an act by foreign government, perhaps, or foreign terrorists, when in fact it was homegrown domestic terrorism. It's just something that our country is going to have to work through. I think that it'll also perhaps galvanize us to resolve to solve these problems in a measured kind of a way.
I guess, hearing you say it's the first time I've reflected all day that it might indeed, and of course it makes sense that it could perhaps take weeks to get those bodies out, and that's going to be a horrible, horrible process for Americans to kind of know is going on the whole time. That's rough.
And it will be. Probably on the good side of that is that unlike a car bomb or a truck bomb like Oklahoma City or the prior event at the World Trade Center, we probably will not be so concerned with physical evidence as we were in those processes. Because we pretty much know what the bomb was. It was the aircraft itself. That gives the search and rescue people a lot more latitude to be able to process the scene for search and rescue without having to consider the law enforcement forensic aspects of things.
Rick, the selection of targets, the Pentagon, Someone earlier today called it the ultimate in-your-face target. Well, I suppose, God forbid, the White House or the Capitol would have been more of one, but they did strike at the center of the Department of Defense. Not only that, they flew a commercial airliner into it. The World Trade Center, the target they couldn't destroy before, that was kind of rubbed in terrorist noses during the trial. Both were hit today, one of them destroyed. What do you make of the target selection here?
Oh, clearly sending a message that they're out to destroy America. Regardless of who the terrorists are here, the message was that we will hit you at your at the symbols of America. Also, the fact that the plane that went down in Pittsburgh was somewhere near Camp David, I find kind of an anachronism. I think that I've never seen a picture of Camp David from the air, so I doubt that that was really the target there.
Right. Someone said that if you look at the Flight Explorer software of that flight path and kind of take it to its logical conclusion, that it's easy to believe that it was kind of the fourth and final leg that it was meant to be, and especially since it was a big jet, it was meant to be the jet that destroyed a coveted landmark in Washington.
Right. I think that's probably accurate.
I want to thank you for coming on tonight after this long day. Rick Hahn, former FBI official and investigator on so many of the crises the FBI has been forced into investigating over the years. Thank you very much for joining us from Los Angeles.
You're welcome, Brian. If I could add one comment, and
yes,
that
sir.
is that with all the comparisons to Japan or the Pearl Harbor event, I think that the perpetrators of this event will find, as the Japanese did, that they have awakened a sleeping giant.
All right. Thank you very much. The quote that became famous back then in 1941. We heard it one other time earlier today. Rick Hahn, thank you for that. We're joined once again in Washington by Chris Matthews. Chris, it's been a while since we talked after the president spoke.
Right.
Washington is a very much a company town, as you know, kind of early to bed, early to rise. A magazine once called it the city of earnest former student council presidents, and it is. It's a good town, and the people there must be shaken tonight. The Department of Defense has been hit directly.
Well, you know, the normal experience for disruption in Washington is a mild snowfall, and you know that, having worked here, that it's kind of a joke because the mildest snowfall shuts down everything. Well, this time it was very different. So many federal employees were just sent home. Schools were closed. The Capitol was closed. All the offices were closed. The White House was closed. People were sent out into the streets and told to go home, and some of them wandered over to Georgetown just to sort of stay in town and wait till the end of the day, perhaps, without any clear purpose. It was really a town, not in chaos, obviously, but a town in a daze. I think you got it right from up there.
Chris, what about the presidency and a crisis? Many presidents, and I think more often than not, have risen to the challenges that have come along during their administrations. But as we mentioned earlier, there's no playbook for this one. There's no case law that George W. Bush can go by. This is unique.
And it's not Oklahoma City.
Right.
Oklahoma City was a particular problem, a homegrown problem of strong anger from the far right, you might say, against the federal government. And people understood that. That was our own problem, and there were some bad people involved, and they were punished. And we had a lot of tears over it, and a lot of dead people, obviously, and a lot of almost celebration of our country because of how much we withstood it. But this is a foreign threat. These are people who don't like America, who are out to get us. They didn't go after the government especially. They didn't go after the Pentagon, but they went after a trade center with lots of people working in it, regular people. They killed a lot of people in airplanes, regular people. They wanted to kill Americans. And I think that's an interesting thing for us in our history, this hatred of America. I think with the Twin Towers going down today, so did, you could say, a pair of vanities we've had about ourselves. One is the obvious one, security, that we're the superpower of the world, and therefore we're secure. We're not, and we know that now. The other was the vanity of popularity. I think Americans have a hard time realizing that there are people in the world who we give no thought to whatever, who give a lot of thought to us and really, really don't like us. And of course, we know a lot of those people live in the Mideast. They're Islamic fundamentalists. They have very strong attitudes about Western influence and our support for Israel. And they really don't like us. And they don't like us as people. And I think there are a lot of smiles over there on the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip today, and we saw those on television. They're pretty frightening to realize that people really do wish you harm and celebrate this horrible demise that people...
Is the only form of escape. But on those same streets, the chaos and vibrations couldn't be avoided. Further north, New Yorkers gathered at Times Square. In humble silence and disbelief, everyone looking up to the big screen. Downtown, the mass exodus began.
I saw everybody crying in the streets, saying their prayers and crying. I saw different races, nationalities, and creeds that usually have differences in one another come together and bond and love and respect.
Along Fifth Avenue, people flooded to the streets to watch together.
Oh my God, it's inside the first building.
The faces of New Yorkers, solemn, quiet, praying. A father trying to give security to the innocent ones. The tiniest of faces protected. Streets filled with anger and shock.
I have never witnessed nothing like this in my entire life. Human beings, parents, daughters and sons jumping out of the window at least from 80-something floors. None of you want to witness that. I'm traumatized for life.
The street where now everyone shares the pain out in the open without shame. The street where office chairs have become eerie stretchers outside a hospital.
We've had multiple types of injuries, from severe burns to blunt injuries and multiple fractures.
The street where a depleted mayor summons some strength.
New York City is a lot stronger than this, and we're going to overcome it, and the people of New York City are going to give an example of how you stand up to terrorism. You just don't be afraid.
But Times Square is empty, the streets are silent, and a city mourns. Maria Hinojosa, CNN, New York.
And I think it is fair to say millions of people were in a state of shock today based on the conversations I've had with people who witnessed this attack. That state of shock is turning to outrage. Joining me right now is Scott Hess and Jennifer Ruth, both of whom were working in the area at the time. I should make it clear before we go any further, some 50,000 people worked in the World Trade Center area. You were not far from there. Both of you were evacuated from your workplaces. What did you see, Jennifer?
I work at the Three World Financial Center on the 35th floor, and my cubicle faces the World Trade Center, and we saw the hind end of something entering the building and the hole, the gaping hole through the building, and then the debris starting to fall. So we then evacuated and crossed the street and saw the second plane before it actually hit the building. And at that point, everyone panicked and screamed and started running north on West Side Highway.
Now, at that point, police obviously had not blocked off streets, so you were able to run as fast as you could.
Right.
What do you remember about what you saw earlier today?
After we evacuated the building, the first tower was on fire, and we saw bodies either leaping or falling from the upper floors, and it was just it was a chilling scene. And a few minutes later, almost in a very surreal action, the second plane, and I could almost see that it was a United plane, I thought, just
that
smashed.
Actually has been confirmed
right,
this
it
evening.
smashed right into the building, and people were just screaming and crying, and it was just, the fire just, started to explode.
Some of the police officials have said tonight that they were surprised about how orderly the evacuations were, not only from your two buildings. You'd expect those to be more orderly than those of the World Trade Center bombings, but that isn't exactly what you experienced on the street.
There was a little more panic on the street. For the most part, things were fairly organized once we got up to the West Side Highway, but there was just people grieving and crying, and some of the schools were being evacuated. There's a bit of panic there, but overall, I think people just needed to get north and just get out of the area.
You saw, as you said, the first attack. You also saw the second plane slam into the South Tower. You heard the mayor tonight say that they have reason to believe that people are still alive in that wreckage. Are either one of you that optimistic based on what you saw? You were very close.
It was very close, but I couldn't see. I left before I was able to escape the scene before the buildings actually fell. And so I don't know what it looked like after that point. People were still evacuating and had the opportunity to get out as I was getting out. So
most companies are advising people not to go to work tomorrow. All the public schools, private schools, parochial schools will be closed.
As you wake up tomorrow morning, I'm sure you have no sense of what that day will be like that awaits you. But give us a preview of what you think it might be like.
Yeah, I mean, just walking down to getting off the subway and looking at the World Trade Center for basically the last 18 or 19 years, every day, it's just not there anymore. And walking up the West Side Highway, just turning around on a continuous basis, they were just not there anymore, and just seeing this bellowing smoke.
It's so eerie out there right now, and one of the things that I was impressed by the day is that there was a plea made for people to donate blood. And I went late this morning to donate blood, and the lines were wrapped around the block, and I told at some hospitals there were 4- and 5-hour waits to donate blood. This does not surprise you, does it?
No, not at all. I mean, everyone has been so affected by this just immediately on the streets. As soon as I got home after the incident, everyone was glum and quiet on the streets. People stayed outside to see if they could get a view, but I mean, it was just complete quiet.
Well, Jennifer and Steve, we appreciate your dropping by. We know that not only has this been a very traumatic day for you, but as Senator Warner said earlier today, one of the worst days in American history. You're very lucky to be alive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right now, we're going to check in with Rose Arce, who is one of our producers who has basically been at Ground Zero most of the day. We find her right now at St. Vincent's Hospital, where several hundred people are being treated right now. Rose, give us an update if you would.
Yes, Paula, I'm actually right here on 8th Avenue, and right over my left shoulder, you would see the Twin Towers on any other night clearly, but tonight there's nothing. It's completely dark. I spent most of the day about 2 blocks from there on the top floor of a building that's just north of the World Trade Center. From there we could see people rushing to the windows as fire was billowing out of the top of the building where the first airplane hit. People were rushing to the windows. They were taking clothes. One thing looked like a blanket that they were waving. And then suddenly there was another explosion, and you saw folks start to jump out the front window of the building and plunge. I saw at least 6 people do this. Folks were pushing each other. Some people were screaming for help and then just falling out. There was chaos on the ground. You could see emergency workers rushing to the scene of the building. Right now it's pretty quiet behind me, but this is an emergency route right over here, 8th Avenue. It's a straight shot from the World Trade Center uptown, and we've been watching emergency vehicles rushing right by us into the hospital that's right up the street. Paula?
Rose, I want to make a clarification now. The police chief earlier reported that they believe there were people alive, and most people interpreted that as alive in the wreckage of the World Trade Center. The police commissioner is issuing clarifications that says they believe there are people alive in nearby buildings downtown, not the Trade Center. Once again, neither officials at the Pentagon or officials here in the city can confirm the magnitude of the tragedy witnessed here in New York City and in Washington today, but once again, the mayor says the statistics will be horrendous and the number of deaths will be very, very high. It's time to go back to Washington now, and Wolf.
Thank you, Paula. We're getting some new information now from our Susan Candiotti in Miami. She's reporting that the FBI has begun the process, or will soon begin the process, of executing search warrants in more than one location in South Florida, including what she says are the homes and post office boxes of several individuals.
But how do you keep it from extending for days and weeks to where people become basically paralyzed?
Right.
And it covers so much of our conversation, it becomes like a kind of video wallpaper. Those are the skeletal sides of the building that people might recognize. But this is an absolutely horrifying scene. And Mark Hatton, here we are as parents trying to explain to the children that things are going to get better and their world will be safe. How do you verbally guard against, God forbid, something else happening, another incident? How do you, in an eye for an eye world, teach them that their country is about to perhaps retaliate?
Most importantly here is that a hostile and anger response is a fairly typical psychological response, along with denial and depression. Hopefully as a country we will not act irrationally and rashly, but rather with a prescribed course of action that is well thought out. That will be an important model to the children as well as to the adults. who are equally traumatized by what we are seeing.
Mark Hatton, thank you very much for coming on tonight. Again, your expertise is important because this is a real job being faced by parents around the country this evening. We're fortunate to be joined by our next guest, presidential historian and author Doris Kearns Goodwin. And Doris, I have to tell you, you're one of the people I have wanted to talk to and listen to all day as we have been covering this story and this president and this Congress and this development in the life of the United States. I want to hear you out on that front, against that backdrop.
Well, you know, I think what you mentioned, the word vulnerability, is probably the most important word, because people felt very vulnerable during Pearl Harbor and after Pearl Harbor. But in a certain sense, the vulnerability was against a military base, and it was in Hawaii, and it wasn't on the mainland. Here it was against people in their offices, on their streets, in planes, in everyday life. And it's much harder for a president to figure out the creative response beyond getting the people who did it. What kind of words can he offer us to know that tomorrow, if we went on a plane, we might be safer? I mean, maybe he's going to have to mobilize the National Guard and put a military personnel on every plane, on every train. They're going to have to think really hard, because what Roosevelt had going for him when he went to Capitol Hill was he knew who the enemy was. He knew that he had to mobilize us to declare war against them, to ask for appropriations. He knew people had to get into the draft, into the service. He knew people had to go to the factories. There was an absolute clear goal. This is much more amorphous, so it's much harder, I think, for Bush. But he's going to have to realize that unless he mobilizes the American people to feel they're doing something, the frustration in these next days is going to be worse than today. Today's the shock. But even after Pearl Harbor, the days that followed were much worse than the shock as the devastation became clear.
Is this the greatest domestic challenge any president since FDR has faced?
Well, you know, it's so hard. I suspect, yes, since FDR. I mean, what FDR faced was not only the Pearl Harbor attack at that time, but the need to mobilize an unprepared country against probably the greatest challenge in Western civilization ever, the Nazis and the Japanese combined. So that in the long run, that challenge hopefully was larger than what this one will be. But the fact that we don't know exactly how to go about getting these people, and that it was on our daily lives, you know, just thinking about the kids as we just listened to that psychologist, my generation grew up with that fear because Russia had gotten the nuclear bomb, that at any moment the entire world could be destroyed. And we had those air raid drills. We'd have to go under our desks in school. I would go to bed at night trying to practice these atomic fallings where you were supposed to have a siren and go under your bed in a second. So there was this subconscious fear that somehow your old world might be undone, but yet that was sort of abstract compared to the kind of fears kids are going to have now about walking on the street, about going to see their father go to an office, or about getting on a plane.
Doris, two of the flights originated up there in Boston. The coverage must be particularly painful on local news there tonight.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's always that feeling was the questions are being asked now, even as we're asked in every one of these tragedies, what could have been done to prevent it from happening? Was it a lapse in security? Was it not? And I guess all of those things will come out in the days ahead. But I think the real answer is going to be not simply to look back with recrimination, but to figure out how to make better whatever those lapses were, if indeed they were.
As a percentage almost in the job, do presidents rise to the occasion? Do they come into the job when they are given a tragedy to deal with?
Probably both.
Top of the World Trade Center at roughly 1,350 feet. Now, the purpose of the animation essentially is to show the descent. Somebody must be pretty well trained in your judgment in order to pull this off and to hit that target with such incredible precision.
Let me put it this way. I think as much experience that as I have in flying airplanes, I would find it very difficult to do that unless somebody gave me a chance to practice it over and over again. The decision to descend and that kind of thing is not a major maneuver, but the maneuver in the final seconds of that flight, both of the flights into the trade centers and certainly the flight into the Pentagon, required a great deal more skill than I think any novice or a less trained person could pull off.
I talked to a former Secretary of State, Lawrence Eagleburger, yesterday, and he said, you know, I thought we had hijackings under control, the ability to stop them. And yet, this was a highly sophisticated, coordinated hijacking of 4 separate planes, all within the course of about an hour, hour and a half. In your mind, have you come up with any explanation?
Yes, the simple explanation is that we blew it. Our system has been flawed for a long time, and your station and many others have reported the kinds of problems we've had with being able to bring all kinds of devices through the security system. It just isn't right yet. And I got to tell you, I woke up this morning with an incredibly radical thought in my mind. What if we said to ourselves, this is a warlike situation? What if we said to ourselves, let's allow the military to quickly be trained and brought into the security business to stay there until we adequately train and equip civilians to take this over? I don't think that is as outlandish now as I did when I first woke up, and we've got to do something drastic for two reasons. One, to make it secure, and two, to give the traveling public the feeling of that security, because one of the things terrorists do is try to scare us into feeling that we are insecure.
Jim, the FAA website, as Chris pointed out earlier today, apparently recites one of the regulations that allows for weapons, for knives up to 4 inches long. How can that be? Here it is. How large a knife can I carry on board with me? The FAA guidelines allow knives with blades up to 4 inches. However, state and local laws may restrict the carriage of smaller knives in a public airport. That is the FAA government website.
Well, I got to tell you, it's all part of a system that assumed a lot of things that we found now not to be true. It assumed that we were never going to have an attack with knives in a cockpit. It assumed a lot of things that have been contributing to a system that just wasn't ready for what happened yesterday. And in my view, quite frankly, may very well not be ready as we sit here and speak now. I really am voting for waiting until it is ready before we start flying.
Jim, what do you have to say to the millions of Americans who travel each and every day in our nation's skies and, in fact, internationally?
I say that we've been hit. Our nose has been bloodied, and we have found that we didn't have a system that was quite up to the task given the situation. However, I truly do believe, and I trust, that our system is smart enough and we do have the right kind of resolve to make sure that we don't put a passenger on a commercial airplane until things are right. I believe that if I were called out to fly today, as much as I have some concerns, I would have to trust in that system, because that system has kept us safe until yesterday. And I believe the lessons we learned yesterday may very well contribute to the safety of tomorrow and tomorrow's tomorrow. So I would say that once you do find that you're cleared to go fly, do so with the confidence that you have in the United States of America and its ability to protect you. That's the greatest thing that we can do to let terrorists know they did not win yesterday.
Well, given the massive loss of life, which we don't even know yet fully, it's a hard lesson to learn. Jim Tillman, retired pilot and former NBC aviation reporter. Thank you so much, Jim. We appreciate it. Chris?
And it was almost exactly 24 hours ago now, Greg, that you and I went on the air to report the beginning of what would be a series of tragedies in the United States. And we want to recap for you briefly the chain of events of yesterday morning. In a matter of an hour and 10 minutes, 4 commercial jetliners would crash. A New York City landmark would be no more, and the U.S. would change forever. It began at 8:50 a.m. Eastern Time. American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles crashes into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. About 20 minutes later, another Boston to Los Angeles flight, hijacked in midair, crashes into the North Tower. That is United Flight 175. 20 minutes later, a third jet, American Airlines Flight 77 from Washington, bound for Los Angeles, crashes into the Pentagon. Back in New York, the intense heat and jet fuel are too much for the soaring Twin Towers. Between 9:50 and 10:30, the 110-story World Trade Center towers collapse. And the terror is not over. At 10 a.m., United Flight 93, which had left Newark, bound for San Francisco, crashes into a field in rural Pennsylvania. There are reports this plane was on a collision course with the presidential retreat at Camp David, Maryland.
Who is responsible for this? And that, of course, is what the U.S. government is going to be looking intensively at. The Boston Herald seemed to break the first news of it this morning. Let me read to you the first couple of very revealing lines of their lead story. Authorities in Massachusetts have identified at least 5 Arab men as suspects in yesterday's terror-launched attacks from Logan's Airport. They have seized in the central parking garage a car laden with Arabic language flight training manuals. Now, 2 of the men whose passports were traced to the United Arab Emirates were brothers, one of whom was a trained pilot. At least 2 other suspects flew to Logan yesterday from Portland, Maine. Authorities believe they had traveled after crossing over from Canada recently. Once in the air, the hijackers in one plane began killing flight attendants in order to lure one of the pilots from the cockpit and seize the plane. Now, officials have assembled a massive team of investigators as these harrowing details of the hijacking began to emerge. Here's a quote. One of the pilots keyed their mic so the conversation between the pilot and the person in the cockpit could be heard. That's according to an unnamed controller. The person in the cockpit was speaking English. He was saying something like, "Don't do anything foolish. You're not going to get hurt."
There is a number of briefings coming up this morning here. We'll have them for you on MSNBC. In New York City, Mayor Rudy Giuliani, less than 10 minutes from now, expected to get behind that podium. Talk about the latest, first of all, in rescue efforts. They are still trying to figure out how many people might be missing. They are still trying to facilitate efforts. There are literally thousands of friends and family members who have desperately been trying to find out the fate of their family members. They have been, the injured, dispersed not only to hospitals across New York City, but Staten Island, to New Jersey, across the river. So they're going to be trying to get that information out. Again, Rudy Giuliani expected in 10 minutes or so. 10:15 Eastern Time, that's about an hour and 15 minutes from now, the Pentagon is going to be holding a briefing. That, of course, is where the 3rd plane crashed yesterday. Also, back in the control room, Chris, are we still expecting a 10 a.m. news conference from the FAA?
Yeah. Secretary Norman Mineta is expected to appear at a news conference and announce that roughly at noon Eastern Time, flights will begin to resume, but it is going to take a great many hours for things to get back to normal. In the meantime, about 2 minutes from now, roughly, we are expecting a news conference at Bellevue Hospital on the east side of Manhattan, where lots of the victims have been taken and are being treated. And in case you're trying to get the best handle you possibly can on the fatality count, there's no way to know for sure. Days, as Chris points out, maybe even weeks before we know the full count. However, we are getting a revised downward fatality count on the number of New York Fire Department. Now 202 firefighters are unaccounted for and feared dead. As tragic as that is, certainly better than the 300 that we were reporting just a couple of hours ago in New York. The police, 57 city and port authority police officers are unaccounted for. Many of the dead being brought to the hospitals, to the morgues, across the Hudson River in New Jersey. In fact, a morgue has been set up at the Army base there. Ferries literally bringing loads of bodies across the Hudson River. And there is the Hudson River as you see it there, the silhouette of what was once the World Trade Center. And the billowing smoke and debris still emanating from the bottom of the collapsed Twin Towers there. In the meantime, the Pentagon now fearing more than 800 have died in that attack that happened after the Twin Towers. And of course, we do know that some 266 passengers died aboard those 4 hijacked planes.
There is a theme in the daily newspapers, and I'm sure you're seeing something similar in your hometown. This is from the New York Daily News. It says, very simply, it's war. And then if you take a look at the New York Post, they call it an act of war, and you open it up, and it says the terror toll may top 10,000. There's just no way to know. But again, we should be getting an update from New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. And you have USA Today.
USA Today is almost...
Within that Mitsubishi sedan was recovered a videotape, an instructional videotape on how to fly a commercial jet, and also a flight manual in Arabic. Also today, we're told by Governor Angus King of Maine that 2 individuals left Portland's jetport yesterday using New Jersey licenses as identification, and they flew to Logan and got onto American Airlines Flight 11, the other flight that crashed into the World Trade Center yesterday morning. Their luggage did not make the connection, and that has been confiscated, and it's been reported that that also contained a copy of a flight manual and a copy of the Koran. So that's 5 suspects who reportedly came through Logan Airport yesterday morning. Very key information, of course, being followed up. Now, the airport remains shut down. We are told that at 11 a.m. there'll be a briefing here by Massport officials, and they will tell us when and under what conditions Logan Airport might reopen. Live in Boston, Bill Rapley, Fox News.
All right, Bill, thanks very much. There is some breaking news to report this morning as well. Let's go to Neil Cavuto down in Fox Central for the latest. Neil?
All right, John, thank you very much. We are getting reports now from the Securities and Exchange Commission that the financial markets could reopen as soon as tomorrow. We have not confirmed this with the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. Reaching this and confirming it with them is very difficult to do at this point. But what we do have is a Dow Jones Wire report that Harvey Pitt, the chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, says the markets are planning to reopen Thursday. Now, this is very important if for no other reason than psychologically that the U.S. capital markets return to business as usual, even though it will be anything but once they do reopen tomorrow. The World Trade Center housed a lot of important brokerage houses, including Morgan Stanley, Dean Witter. A bulk of their offices were in one World Trade Center. Of course, that tower among the two that collapsed yesterday. But again, indications are that the financial markets are looking at an open tomorrow. We don't know exactly when that will be, but this would be the first time the exchanges have opened since this whole mess started yesterday morning. Back to you, John.
All right, it's going to be momentous when that happens. Neil Cavuto, thanks very much. John Gibson, back to you.
John Scott, first of all, I should tell everybody that President Bush plans to address the nation at 10:45 Eastern Time. Fox News Channel will, of course, carry the president's statement live, and we can expect that in just a little more than an hour. Meanwhile, let us go to our Washington bureau and former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, who has some insight on what may be occurring in the houses of Congress when they convene shortly. Mr. Gingrich, I understand that you have some information on what will be calls for a declaration of war. Who would call for such a thing, and who would we declare war against?
Well, it's ultimately up to the president. It's his call, but I know that there's a great deal of work underway to consider calling for a declaration of war, which I would personally strongly support. The declaration would be against bin Laden and any terrorist who supported him, and the declaration would be against any state which harbored or protected bin Laden after the United States demanded that they were turned over. I think that clearly Afghanistan is a potential target, Sudan is a potential target. I don't know beyond that, but it's increasingly clear, as you just reported, that we are going to be able to track down the evidence of who was involved. This was a systematic act of war, and it is very, very important that we move in the direction of making this a matter of war, a matter of national security policy, not a criminal justice system matter. And I think that in that sense, my hope is that this morning the president will be indicating that he will be coming to the Congress soon and that he'll be asking the Congress for a declaration of war.
So, Mr. Gingrich, I'm trying to get the picture here. It is obviously an act of war. More people, as Ollie North pointed out to us this morning, more people probably died in that scene behind me than died on the beaches of Normandy. However, don't we normally need to declare war against an entity rather than an individual? In other words...
No, you would declare war against the terrorist organizations and any governments which support, sustain, or protect those terrorist organizations. Ollie North did yesterday correctly draw the parallel between Thomas Jefferson taking on the Barbary pirates, who were, in that period, outlaws outside the law, and the situation that we're now dealing with. And in the Marine Corps hymn, The Shores of Tripoli, is a reference to that 1803 decision by the United States that it would not tolerate that kind of outlaw behavior. So you can't, it's not a legal question here. The Congress of the United States has the power to declare war. The president has the power as commander-in-chief to recommend that we declare war. We are faced with a new reality, as you just said. More people died yesterday, more civilians died yesterday than on any day in American history. It is clear that forces have declared war against the United States. What is not yet clear is whether we're prepared to step up to that, declare war, and use the elements of war, the military, the intelligence community, or whether we're going to try to deal with this as a criminal justice problem, which, in my judgment, would be an enormous mistake.
Yeah, it would be insufficient. I think everybody agrees with that. But Speaker Gingrich, before I lose you, before I run out of time, if a declaration of war occurs, how does that free the hand of the president as would be different from the situation today as we speak?
Look, if you were to read Wes Clark's book about the Kosovo campaign, Waging Modern War, he was the American general in command. He talks about how lawyers decided targeting. Lawyers decided what could be done because we weren't technically at war. When you go to war, you have a whole new set of rules. You can blockade, you can use force, and you communicate to other governments, such as Sudan and Afghanistan, that the United States is now serious, that killing our men, women, and children, killing people in our cities will never be accepted, and you're either with us against the terrorist or you're with the terrorist against us, but there will be no neutrals. It's a very, very big difference. I can't overstate the difference between being at war and failing to have a declaration of war.
Former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, anticipating what is coming up this morning, calls for a declaration of war, which the president may very well have to follow. Mr. Gingrich, thanks very much. Let's go now back to the studio and John Scott.
All right, John Gibson, thanks very much. And within the hour, perhaps an hour and 15 minutes, we are expecting to hear from President Bush. We don't know exactly what that speech will contain, but we will certainly bring you there live to the White House when that speech begins. I want to introduce now a gentleman who was once charged with protecting the safety of the citizens of New York, both as police commissioner and fire commissioner. Howard Safer is with us. You must wince like we all do when you see the replays of those pictures of those planes hitting the buildings.
It is a police commissioner or a fire commissioner's worst nightmare, and I've lost some personal friends in this tragedy, and this is the most barbaric act that one could imagine.
Because, of course, a number of New York City firefighters, hundreds of them, in fact, were at the base of those buildings trying to help evacuate people when the buildings came down on top of them.
That's right. Firefighters and police officers run into danger while other people run the other way, and they were there doing their jobs when the building collapsed.
What are the hopes for rescuing more people, perhaps hundreds of people alive? Can we get our hopes up that high?
Well, I think there's always hope. I think when you have a collapse as big as this, there's always a possibility people are in pockets within the wreckage. The president has dispatched 8 urban search and rescue teams from around the country that have specialized equipment, dogs, fiber optic cameras that can get into small spaces, and if there's any chance of finding somebody, these teams can do it.
You have such a wide-ranging perspective on this tragedy because not only were you police commissioner, not only were you fire commissioner here, but you also have worked for the Drug Enforcement Agency and for the U.S. Marshals Service. Now, from a law enforcement standpoint, from a military action standpoint even, what should the response of the United States be to what happened yesterday?
Well, the response has to be focused, it has to be immediate, and in my view, it has to be final. We cannot be talking around the edges of this problem. What we have to do is we have to identify who did it, who supports them, and in plain language, we have to take them out.
Can we do that? Do we have the capability?
I think we do have the capability with some help from some of our allies. One of the problems, I believe, is that since the Church Committee, when Senator Church basically excoriated the CIA and made them relatively impotent in the use of human resources, we have been way behind the 8 ball in having good human intelligence. And that's really what you need in this kind of situation. And I think we have to give the CIA back the power to get involved in what is a dirty business and get involved in covert human activities that may be distasteful to civil libertarians but protects our freedom.
There was a time when, during the spate of hijackings afflicting this country, armed sky marshals were flying on, was it all American flights or was it selected U.S. domestic flights?
At the beginning it was all, then it was selected, and then it was none. And I believe that the Sky Marshal program could be very effective with properly trained personnel, with proper weapons. You may note that there has never been a hijacking of an El Al airliner. And El Al has personnel, security personnel on all of their flights, and are very careful about their security.
I travel frequently, fly a lot. I take this Leatherman kind of tool, a utility tool. The blade is virtually as sharp as a razor, and nobody has ever prevented me from bringing this thing on a plane. And with this kind of knife eventually and some simple box cutters, a bunch of people were apparently able to inflict the worst civilian casualty count this country has ever seen.
Well, that comes right back to the issue of airport security and whether or not we're serious about airport security, which we are not. Basically, the FAA, which controls airport security, has caved to the commercial airlines who are more interested in getting people through magnetometers and through x-ray machines so they can spend money at the stores in the airports and onto their flights than they are about security.
Is it time to bring the Sky Marshals back?
Well, I think it's time to bring the Sky Marshals back. It's time to look at new technology relative to entry into airports. And one of the reasons that you could get that knife onto an aircraft is I've seen many, many times that the low-paid personnel at the checkpoints, you'll put that in a plastic bucket and they'll just shove it over the top of the x-ray machine and hand it back to you. We need better trained personnel, we need better procedures, and we need better technology.
Howard Safer, again, a man who lost many friends in the disaster yesterday. We thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Let's go back up and check in now with John Gibson. John?
You know, John Scott, one of the, there are a couple amazing stories. This morning we heard about 6 firemen and 2 police officers. There are 300 firemen missing in the collapse of the Twin Towers yesterday. 6 of them and 6 of their police brethren and 2 Port Authority officers were dug out of the rubble alive and apparently well, or well enough considering. Also an amazing story Eric Shawn told us about a man who was pulled out of the rubble, a Port Authority police, who told his rescuers that he had been on the 82nd floor. He had ridden the wreckage down 82 floors and lived to tell about it. Meanwhile, down in Daytona Beach, Florida, this investigation is underway. Our Orlando Salinas is there. Orlando, our understanding is they are investigating a flight school to see if the people who hijacked these planes were trained on how to fly 757s and 767s there in Florida. Is that right?
You got it right. You hit it right on the head, John. Exactly it. As you said this morning, we are here in Daytona Beach, Florida. Chris Pontius, our photographer. Chris, if you could move it over that way. Over here to my left, you're right at home, John. That is the Daytona 500 Speedway. A little over to the left of that, you've got the Daytona Beach International Airport. Now, the FBI, also Daytona Beach Police, Bomb Squad, all out here in force. They were here on the campus of the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. They were here, started getting here right around 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. Why here? Why this specific aviation school? Investigators have apparently intercepted cell phone calls linking yesterday's attacks in New York, also D.C., also Pittsburgh, to what it calls sympathizers in Broward County, Florida, as well as right here in Daytona Beach. Now, here's what we understand has taken place here yesterday. A red Camaro was seized by federal agents. It's believed to be owned by one of the terrorists on one of those 4 planes that were hijacked yesterday. Which one? We're not sure just yet. Of course, all of those suspects, those terrorists, also died in those crashes. Now, why the focus on Embry-Riddle right here in this area? Because this school apparently does indeed recruit and train wannabe pilots from all over the world. Nearly 800 students on this campus alone from Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Lebanon, Kuwait, Tunisia. The list goes on and on. Now, investigators say that they have got their hands on a manifest list from all 4 of those planes. That manifest list, or should list clearly, the names of all of the passengers and crew. One manifest does include the name of one person believed to support billionaire terrorist Arab Osama bin Laden. That person believed to have been a student here at Embry-Riddle University. U.S. officials pointing to cell phone calls they intercepted following yesterday's attacks, where supporters apparently, supposedly, congratulated each other on their day's work, supporters right here in Daytona. Now, bin Laden has been tied to a string of attacks against American overseas, and the 1993 bombing, of course, of the World Trade Center, an underground car bomb in that case. The U.S. intelligence community believes its best information is that bin Laden is living in Afghanistan and is being protected there. Afghanistan's ruling Islamic militia, the Taliban, saying that bin Laden did not do it. They say he doesn't have enough money to pull this sort of thing off. It's just too big. It's too well planned. U.S. officials, of course, don't buy that for a single minute. Now, just as cell phone calls may now link bin Laden to this attack, cell phones also gave some of the victims on those 4 planes yesterday one last chance to speak to their families, in each case just seconds before their planes crashed. Investigators say that this aviation school, Embry-Riddle in Daytona Beach, has highly sophisticated flight simulators, and that they believe the hijackers may have been trained right here on this campus. Also have to tell you, there is another school here in Daytona Beach, and apparently both of these schools do recruit students from overseas. I have to tell you also right now, the FBI, and we understand also more police from Daytona Beach, are on their way to the school this morning. We understand more are on their way here. Also, the school says they may be giving a press conference sometime later on this afternoon. When that happens, John, of course, we'll bring it back to you. John?
Orlando Salinas in Daytona connecting some of the dots for us. A lot of us wondering how it was possible that hijackers could take over the controls of these planes. In the case of two of them coming out of Boston, hijacking the planes hundreds of miles from New York City, and yet finding the twin trade towers like needles in the haystack and ramming those planes dead on into the towers. As the tower, in fact, the towers are big, they are huge, but considering the vast airspace around here and considering the distance those planes flew to hit those towers, it obviously was a trained pilot at the yoke. We have heard from people saying you can learn how to do this on a home computer with a flight simulator, but we've heard from others experts saying no, it requires a bit more expertise. And Orlando Salinas now reporting to us what may have been the connection between the hijackers and that expertise, a flight training school in Daytona, Florida. John Scott, back to you in the studio.
Thanks, John. You know, yesterday was the most awful day any of us has ever seen, but it could have been worse. We are learning that the White House may have been one of the targets. James Rosen has more on that now. James?
Well, John, President Bush arrived at work this morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Time inside the Oval Office, as he normally does. But that facade of normalcy cannot obscure the fact that we are all changed people today. And although it suffered no physical damage like the Twin Towers or the Pentagon, the White House is forever a changed place. Now, the president arrived back here at the White House around 7 p.m. last night. Yesterday's heinous attacks came as Mr. Bush was about to speak to school children in Sarasota, Florida. After the full scope of the attacks became known, the president left for an Air Force base in Louisiana, where he made some brief public remarks. The White House by mid-afternoon was still considered too unsafe for the president to return here, so instead...
Giuliani on the rescue efforts down at the World Trade Center. Let's listen to the mayor.
Good morning. We just completed a long meeting with all of the agencies of the city, state, governor, participated in it, and the Port Authority, so that we can work on the things that we have to do today to, first of all, focus our efforts on recovering as many people as we can and save lives. Second, try to begin the removal of debris to that area of the city, which is going to be a task that goes on for at least 2 or 3 weeks. And then focus on the other issues that are of importance to the city. Make sure that food comes into the city, make sure that people are able to go about their lives and are taken care of in the hospitals, and to try to bring the city back to normal as soon as possible. And we're going to aim to try to do that for the rest of Manhattan starting tomorrow. And we'll be focusing on that and trying to accomplish that all day today. We have been successful in recovering at least one other person, Port Authority police officer. We're hopefully going to be able to recover a fourth one, and we're in the process of doing everything we can to try to locate other people, and that'll be the major focus of our attention. We also appeal to people that may have private videos of the occurrence, since some came forward late yesterday and last evening. If they do, please contact the police department and the FBI, because it could be of enormous help in the investigation of the case. We're going to try to open schools tomorrow. We're hopeful that we'll be able to, we certainly will be able to do it in the entire city, and we'll be working on a plan for the maximum number of schools that we can open on the east side of Manhattan, particularly the lower east side of Manhattan. Con Edison is working I think as intensely as they possibly can to try to get power restored. It's going to take some time, and we're bringing generators in. The governor made available to us a group of generators that we've moved to Randall's Island, and we will be using them in that area of the east side that needs generator power, because they may need it for quite some time. We were able to move 120 dump trucks out of the city last night, which will give you a sense of the work that was done overnight. So some of the debris has already been removed. More of it is being removed, and it'll be done by barge all throughout the day today. The subway system is operating in all of the city, but below 14th Street, and largely because right now we have that closed. So if you're in any of the other 4 boroughs, public transportation is normal, the subways are normal, the buses are normal. If you're in Manhattan, the subways are going to be working to 14th Street, and then for those that go underneath, they'll just go straight out to Brooklyn. As soon as we can get that area of the city open, however, there will be subway service there, except for the 1, 2, and 3 lines, the West Side IRT below 34th Street, because of the collapse that took place. And again, we ask all New Yorkers to cooperate and to try to help each other. There are going to be a lot of people today who need help and need assistance, either because of the fact that they know people that were lost in this terrible tragedy, or because they're just frightened of what may happen. If you could comfort them and help them and assist them, particularly elderly people, that might be a way in which you can contribute. And we're getting very, very close cooperation from the state, from the federal government. I think people in New York, the best way they can deal with this right now is not only to deal with their own grief, which we all feel and have, but to show that we're not going to be in any way affected by this, that we're not going to be cowed by it, that we're not afraid, that we're going to go about our business and lead normal lives and not let these cowards affect us in any way like they're trying to do, which is to instill fear in us. Governor?
Mayor, thank you. As the mayor indicated, the focus right now is still on search and rescue, in the hopes that we can get other people out of the debris and save more lives. We have, at last count, 18 different search and rescue teams down there. And I want to thank my colleagues. We have 8 from Connecticut that Governor Rowland sent in, others from around the country. We have a specialized team coming that Governor Calderon is sending from Puerto Rico. And it's this type of support from around the country that is allowing us to get through this. I have to tell you, I was down at the scene last night, and Mayor, your police and fire not only were heroes at the beginning, but they're still heroes. They're down there under enormous personal strain and risk. I saw them at the ground zero while a high-rise was on fire right across the street that could have collapsed, and they are risking their lives to try to save their friends and their colleagues and the New Yorkers who are still trapped. And we have to thank them, say a prayer for them. This is a time for rescue, it's a time for commitment, but it's also a time to reflect and grieve for those who didn't have their parents come home last night, or for those who still might be lost. And we will get through this because, as the mayor indicated, New Yorkers come together in times of crisis, and we've seen tremendous spirit donating blood, volunteering at hospitals, helping us to get through this. And we have done everything we could to be supportive. We have National Guard troops here now. We are mobilizing fire departments from Westchester and Rockland that are backing up in the Bronx. We're mobilizing fire departments from Nassau and Suffolk that will help in some of the outer boroughs on Long Island. But what we don't need are people just simply coming in to volunteer. We have the hotlines, we have the organization, we have tremendous coordination between the city and the state and the federal government. So people who want to exercise their expertise, whether they're firefighters, they should contact their fire department. If they're EMTs or nurses, they should contact the hotline that we have set up at the state, where we've already had about 10,000 calls. So this is a tragic episode in American history, but New Yorkers will get through this. America will get through this. We will not be intimidated. We will not lose our freedom.
What is the status of the World Trade?
One other thing that we should do. These are the flight recorder boxes that the firefighters and the police officers and the rescuers are looking for. And we're going to we'll give you copies of this. We'd like you to put it out as broadly as possible. We're giving copies to all the rescue people and recovery people so that they can try to find them. Altogether there'll be 4, 2 for each airplane. And that's what they look like, except it'll be obviously covered with soot and dirt. but there are a lot of people involved in the recovery and relief effort who know what they're looking for, and then there'll be some that don't. So if we can give those out, it would be very important. This morning's meeting was devoted to the relief and recovery effort largely. This afternoon, we're going to focus on the economic recovery of the city and work with the hotels, the restaurants, the real estate industry. We're going to rebuild. We're not only going to rebuild, we're going to come out of this stronger than we were before. And in addition to having wonderful people in New York, as the governor indicated, we also have the strongest business community of any place in the world. And we're going to call upon them, and we're going to need their help. But we're going to come out of this emotionally stronger, politically stronger, much closer together as a city, and we're going to come out of this economically stronger, too. And we're going to start working on that right away.
What's the status of the World Financial Center? There appears to be a fire burning across the street now. It's fairly significant.
I believe... Do you want to answer that, Richard? I'll have the FBI.
The smoke from the World Financial Center was from a defective generator that the fire department worked on. There was no major fire at the World Financial Center.
A statement from the FBI. The FBI.
I'll make a brief statement. Obviously, as you all know, this is a pending criminal investigation. I can tell you that it is being coordinated by Director Mueller at FBI headquarters. We have essentially all 56 field offices in the country involved in this. There are but primarily a dozen offices where the airplanes were hijacked and left. We're doing a lot of things as far as at those particular airports, checking on the planes, checking with crews, cleaning people. All of that is ongoing as we speak. Probably the major thrust that we are doing right now is we do have the manifest. We're reaching out to all of the families, interviewing them, and the primary purpose of that is obviously to get any information. You have had, in the media as reported, there's been a number of calls made from these various planes. We would like to put out to the people, if they haven't reported that to law enforcement, to call their local law enforcement or FBI so we can get a hold of it. The obvious thrust for us right at this particular point in time is to identify the number and the individuals who were in fact hijackers. So that is the major thrust. We will be doing a crime scene. The primary thing is, as the mayor just pointed out to you, is the black boxes. We're working with the city, but again, that's going to follow the search and rescue, ongoing intensive investigation. That's all I have at this time.
Can you say anything about the arrest in Florida and the seizure of a car in Florida and the seizure of a car in
We have a number of leads that we're running around the country. A number of these, I'm not going to get into specifics other than it's my understanding we did detain some individuals over in New Jersey. Essentially, we are finding out that is not all that relevant at this particular point in time, but I'm going to limit my comments. That is going to any of the investigative news pertaining to this investigation will come out of Washington, D.C.
Is there anyone in custody at this time? Is there anyone in custody at this time?
Other than the ones that I just mentioned to you, there are some over in New Jersey. That's the only one.
Can you explain to us, Mr. Mon, how airports, airlines have been hijacked to come into the New York area without being detected by radar, without the route that they were taken being questioned by people in Transcon or radar?
I can't really answer that. That would be FAA and NTSB. I'm not going to get in. I don't know the answer to that.
Did you have any warning at all that there were hijacked planes in the air?
No, I can tell you this was a surprise. As the mayor and the governor has pointed out, it was a surprise, a shock. We had no forewarning of this happening.
Mr. Mon, there were reports that the FBI was investigating a hijacked plane just before the first plane hit the World Trade Center. Is that true?
And really, I think when people reach out to each other in this way, it is a kind of spirit.
And we've received the latest intelligence updates. The deliberate and deadly attacks which were carried out yesterday against our country were more than acts of terror. They were acts of war. This will require our country to unite in steadfast determination and resolve. Freedom and democracy are under attack. The American people need to know we're facing a different enemy than we have ever faced. This enemy hides in shadows and has no regard for human life. This is an enemy who preys on innocent and unsuspecting people, then runs for cover. But it won't be able to run for cover forever. This is an enemy that tries to hide, but it won't be able to hide forever. This is an enemy that thinks its harbors are safe, but they won't be safe forever. This enemy attacked not just our people, but all freedom-loving people everywhere in the world. The United States of America will use all our resources to conquer this enemy. We will rally the world. We will be patient, we'll be focused, and we will be steadfast in our determination. This battle will take time and resolve, but make no mistake about it, we will win. The federal government and all our agencies are conducting business, but it is not business as usual. We are operating on heightened security alert. America is going forward, and as we do so, we must remain keenly aware of the threats to our country. Those in authority should take appropriate precautions to protect our citizens. But we will not allow this enemy to win the war by changing our way of life or restricting our freedoms. This morning I am sending to Congress a request for emergency funding authority so that we are prepared to spend whatever it takes to rescue victims, to help the citizens of New York City and Washington, D.C. respond to this tragedy, and to protect our national security. I want to thank the members of Congress for their unity and support. America is united. The freedom-loving nations of the world stand by our side. This will be a monumental struggle of good versus evil, but good will prevail. Thank you very much.
Seeking a formal declaration.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Flag, please.
Formally, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Please. Thanks.
The President certainly does not want to answer questions at the moment, nor want to be committed to anything beyond his prepared remarks. There you see the Secretary of Defense is there. This is this small, there's the Attorney General right beside the Secretary of Defense. A very trying day, unquestionably, for the Cabinet, listening to the President, and I think in time trying to figure out.
Massport Director of Aviation, Tom Kitten, and Massport Director of Public Safety, Joe Lawless. This morning, I instructed Massport staff to focus on 3 priorities. Number 1 is to continue to assist law enforcement with the ongoing investigation. Number 2 is to work with the airline's family assistance teams to transition the Family Assistance Center at the Hilton to them and to continue to aid the numerous family members who are currently at the airport. Number 3 is to begin to focus on reopening the airport, including full compliance with the new security requirements being imposed on all U.S. airports. We received specific guidance on these measures from the FAA a short time ago. And I'm proud to say that many of these measures have been in place at Logan for many years. In addition, I spoke with Governor Swift this morning, and she has instructed us to go beyond these FAA requirements by placing state police at all security checkpoints at Logan Airport. With the new FAA requirements and the additional security at Logan, we are confident that when the airport is reopened, the safety of the traveling public will be ensured. I'm going to turn this over to our other speakers. Let me just say that due to the ongoing investigation and for the sake of public safety, the law enforcement officials who are here with us today are limited in the questions that they can answer and the facts that they can confirm. Let me first ask Tom Kinton, the Director of Aviation for Logan Airport, to speak.
Good morning. As Ginny mentioned, we are focused on a reopening of this airport, and I cannot tell you what time that will occur. I'm going to go through a number of issues, summarizing the guidance that we have been given by FAA, both the airlines and the airport operator, that has to be done and has to be in place before this airport can open. A lot of it, as you will see, will take a lot of time, and we are going to take our time. And if we have to delay the reopening of this airport, as others open around the country, we will delay the reopening to get it done and get it right. First of all, let me reemphasize that the guidance is for all U.S. airports. It will begin with immediately evacuation of all terminals and sweeping of K-9 teams, explosive K-9 teams. Increased presence of uniformed personnel, plainclothes security personnel, and others in all areas of the airport. And as you heard mentioned, we will be staffing the security checkpoints with uniformed state police, which goes beyond the guidance given to us by FAA. Be increasing the frequency of random ID checks in the secured areas of Logan Airport. We will secure, we already have them in place, bomb detection teams for quick response here at Logan Airport. We will be reducing the number of operational access points into the airport. We will also discontinue curbside check-in and remove unauthorized vehicles that are within 300 feet of any terminal building. And that point there is probably one of the most time-consuming things we have to accomplish, because presently there are over 9,000 vehicles parked at Logan Airport. One of the garages, Terminal B, has almost 2,500 vehicles, and it needs to be emptied. We are in the process of doing that and relocating those cars to Suffolk Downs, and we will not reopen that terminal, certainly, and perhaps not the airport, until that task is completed. There is FAA is prohibiting the sale or use of knives, regardless of any size, in any sterile areas of the airport. That includes concession operators, food and beverage, as well as any retail operators that may sell such items. That means anything metal or plastic. Airport operators will develop an awareness plan to keep all airport employees informed about security, and the airport operators and the FAA shall review and reevaluate these contingency plans for ongoing airport security threats that may develop. Airlines will not be accepting cargo or mail, and prior to passenger boarding of any airplanes, those aircraft must undergo a comprehensive search. That's each and every flight before they are boarded by passengers. And as I said at the beginning, we do not have an estimate on when this airport will reopen. Possibly it could be for some relocation of flights that are on the ground, ferrying empty airplanes back into position later today. And again, no estimate on reopening the airport for commercial flights until we have a better handle on both the airline responsibility here and the airport operator responsibilities being fulfilled. We've already had an air carrier meeting. We held it this morning. This work is underway, and we'll be meeting with the air carriers later this afternoon to update and keep the traveling public updated relative to the reopening of Logan Airport. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. The next speaker is Colonel John DeFava, Massachusetts State Police.
Thank you, Director. Good morning. The Massachusetts State Police is prepared to provide all necessary resources to assist the Massport Authority in reaching and surpassing those new security measures as mandated by the FAA. These resources will include additional personnel, special and tactical units such as explosive ordnance disposal personnel, and canines that are capable of sniffing out explosives. These measures will stay in place indefinitely to ensure the safety of the public at the airport. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Charlie Prouty, FBI Special Agent in Charge, Boston.
Thank you, Director. I want to reassure all New England citizens that your law enforcement is aggressively investigating this horrific event. First of all, my heart goes out to the victims and the families in this tragedy. Because this appears to be a terrorist attack, the FBI will be taking lead investigative status in this. We set up a command post in the FBI office in Boston yesterday as soon as we received notice of the hijacking. This is a joint command post with State Department, ATF, Customs, the Massachusetts State Police, OSI, Boston Police Department, Department of Transportation, U.S. Secret Service, and the U.S. Marshals represented. We're also involved in Massport's command post at Logan Airport. We'll continue to man these command posts and continue our joint investigations around the clock until all investigations have been completed. We are coordinating our investigation with FBI headquarters and with other federal agencies. A website and a toll-free tip line has been established. For this case, we're using the Internet Fraud Complaint Center website, which is www.ifccfbi.gov, because it's an existing site designed to receive information from the public. The toll-free number is 1-866-483-5137, and we've had these two lines up for the last day, and we have been getting some good information and some good tips. At this time, the White House is coordinating all public information at the national level. As this is an ongoing case, I'll not be discussing the case or taking any questions, but I can assure you that absolutely everything will be done to identify and bring the perpetrators to justice. Thank you.
Sorry. We have one more speaker, Massachusetts U.S. Attorney Jim Farmer.
Thank you, Director Buckingham. I'm really here to second the comments of Mr. Prouty. I'm here first to doubly ensure the public that the prosecutive resources of the Department of Justice, and specifically the United States Attorney Office in Massachusetts, are working round the clock in the closest possible coordination with all federal, state, and local law enforcement investigative agencies. I will be making no statement and taking no questions as well. It is and will be remaining our highest priority to conduct a successful criminal investigation of these critical events. I would ask your indulgence and your understanding that at this time we are simply unable to make any further comment.
Are there any other questions not pertaining to the investigation?
We've been watching a news conference at Boston's Logan Airport where officials there say they are not prepared to resume scheduled air service until they make modifications to their security. We have heard similar announcements from Los Angeles Airport, Atlanta Hartsfield Airport. The FAA has said they will make the call sometime after noon Eastern. That's about 10 minutes from now as to when airports and airlines can resume flights, but based on 3 major airports already saying not yet, I think it's safe to say it'll be some time before scheduled air service resumes in this country. NBC's Bob Hager is standing by in Washington. Bob, we heard officials lay out the security steps that will be taken, dogs, bomb-smithing dogs, plainclothes officers, random ID checks, the removal of vehicles, the terminal. unless I missed it, nothing there addresses somebody hiding a knife.
No, I don't think so, and that's going to become an issue, particularly with those X-ray screening devices, because right now I believe that knives are not on the absolutely prohibited list. It's kind of up to the discretion of the screener on how menacing they look or not, but I've heard many people say how they take a hunting knife on a plane or something like that. I think one rule of guidance has been if the blade is less than 4 inches, but you could do a lot of damage with a knife less than 4 inches. But otherwise, a lot of those measures they're pretty tough. Moving the cars more than 200 yards away from a terminal, and there you heard the people from Logan say that means they're going to have to empty one entire parking garage, searching each plane before passengers board, sweeping the terminals before they're even reopened. Those are very tough checks. So this is, as you point out, this is going to take quite a while, Bob, for airports to get this done.
Until yesterday, I could go out to LaGuardia Airport, and on 10 minutes notice, if I can go down the terminal, I can get on an airplane and fly down to Washington to you. Do you think we'll ever see that again, or are the airlines going to inherently have to reduce schedules to accommodate all these procedures? Well,
I don't think reduce schedules so much as warn people to get to the airport even earlier than they have been. We'll see as these things are implemented, because last time what happened after the Persian Gulf War, really, we instituted a bunch of fairly draconian announcements anyway about stepping up security, and then gradually they fell off, and particularly as airlines got under pressure because flights were running late and airlines or terminals were overcrowded, and so gradually there was some falling back to that, and particularly that screening issue that you mentioned. So I think in this case it's probably something we're going to see as these things actually get put into practice, whether they're going to require that much extra time getting to the terminal ahead of time.
We've seen many, many times before parts of the country shut down for air traffic because of hurricanes or massive snowstorms. We've never seen anything on this scale. How long do you think it will take to bring back air service to something resembling normalcy?
Now, this is the first time that they've ever had anything like this, a nationwide ground. So now, if you go to the history of it, when you have a snowstorm or something and it's bad in one region, but there's this ripple effect that causes planes to be delayed all over the country, and easily after those storms, it's taken 2 and 3 days to get back to normal. So I would say you could count on at least that in this case, and maybe even more. And then there are all those poor people who got stranded yesterday, and their luggage is here and they're there, and it's just going to be a lot of confusion and take a lot of straightening out.
NBC's Robert Hager in Washington. Robert, thank you for joining us. And again, we expect to hear something from the FAA sometime after noon as to what they'll expect of airports and when they'll at least give the green light. But again, ultimately, it's up to the individual airports to decide when they have met all their goals.
Which was the Boston to Los Angeles flight which crashed into the World Trade Center, and we're actually told, which sounds quite stunning, that his passport may have been recovered in the rubble. And the other is an Egyptian national, and he is described as being a trained pilot. I don't know how anybody knows this at the moment yet, but we'll get to that in a minute. I've given you the bare bones of this, and it's unclear precisely which flight he was on. But we do now believe that are fairly certain now that the Attorney General, John Ashcroft, is going to give, I should say we're fairly certain, we believe that the Attorney General and the Director of the FBI will talk to the country this afternoon. Now, whether they will announce arrests or whether they will give us some details in the investigation, we do not know. But it would not be a great surprise. In fact, we should expect the Director of the FBI and the Attorney General to talk to the nation under these circumstances at some point today. And we do not know if arrests have been made. We do not know if people have been detained. We do not know if people have been charged. We do not know if people have been spoken to as possible witnesses or suspects in this case. But as the morning has gone on, and we're now into the early afternoon in the East already, the information about individuals involved in this investigation appears, the emphasis appears to be getting a little harder. I did mention earlier, as did Ted Koppel, that the connection between this attack on the United States and the connection between the United States and Israel is a constant one. I wondered what was happening in the Middle East today. Israeli troops backed by tanks and helicopters raided a West Bank town, this is in the Palestinian territories, and 2 nearby villages early Wednesday. Israelis said, as they always do, they're intensifying their hunt for Palestinian terrorists. 7 Palestinians were killed by Israeli fire, including an 11-year-old girl, and 3 people described as Islamic militants. It's very difficult every day as we see the reporting coming in from the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians to 4 parts of Manhattan today. And the investigation continues on a variety of levels. The President has had a cabinet meeting today, and he has been very outspoken today, the President, about being involved in a war with terrorism. And now we have, coming up from Florida, Jeffrey Kaufman, ABC's Jeffrey Kaufman, is in on Florida, and I think can give us better details on the investigation in Florida. Jeffrey? Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Peter. Some significant developments here in South Florida. The FBI have been on the trail of at least one of the alleged hijackers, a man named Mohammed Atta. They have traced him to an address in Coral Springs, that's just north of Fort Lauderdale, and they searched that home yesterday, about 3 hours last night. They have also, if we go to the other coast, that's the home in Coral Springs that they searched last night. That is the home listed on his driver's license. Our investigative unit, Peter, has confirmed that Mohammed Atta is an Egyptian national, that he is a trained pilot. If we go to the other coast, to Venice, Florida, on the Gulf Coast just south of Sarasota, Mohammed Atta surfaced there about 15 months ago with a friend. He trained at the Venice Municipal Airport. I spoke to the owner of Huffman Aviation, who remembered Mohammed Atta and his friend. Atta stayed with a man named Charles Voss, an accountant associated with the airport, who put them up simply as a favor. As he told a local reporter, he did it simply because if we didn't put them up, we might lose the business to another school. Atta and his friends stayed with Voss and his wife for about a week, but Voss says that they were so rude that they kicked them out and asked them to leave. That was about 15 months ago, and we don't know whether the other person with him is connected to this. Peter?
All right, you got it back in there, have you, Jeffrey?
Yeah, let me put it in. I'm sorry, we were having some feedback in there. Go ahead, please.
Okay, dokie. Can you hear me clearly
Yes,
without the feedback?
Yes.
And I just missed this because I was also distracted. They've gone to this home in Venice, Florida, the FBI agents, which belonged, or at least where Mohammed Atta was staying.
That's correct, Peter. Atta apparently trained at the local aviation field there at the Venice Municipal Airport about 15 months ago. But more recently, he is traced to a home on the other side, in Coral Springs, Florida, which is just north of Fort Lauderdale. That's the number listed on his, the address listed on his driver's license. As well, Peter, police have issued 2 license plates, 2 cars that they're looking for. One of those cars is traced to Mohammed Atta. It's a 1989 Pontiac Grand Prix, and that they're looking for that, and they're looking for another car. They haven't told us why they're looking for the other car.
But do they know where Mohammed Atta is?
We believe, Peter, we don't know, but we believe he was on board that plane. His name was apparently on the manifest of one of those four planes.
Now, that's what I wanted to get clear. We believe that he is, according to the investigative unit, one of the people on board the aircraft. Now, we've heard various descriptions about the FBI office in Miami just brewing with activity. Have you been able to characterize it beyond that in any way?
Well, I can tell you that out front of the FBI office there are men toting machine guns. I mean, it looks very menacing over there. Nobody gets in. Apparently a UPS truck driver came up carrying packages, and they said, "Go away. We don't want that stuff here today. This is it's bad timing." Nobody's getting near there without complete searches. They're looking under the cars. I'm sure this is happening in other places across the country, but they're sniffing for bombs. It is very tight security.
Recovery efforts with NBC's David Bloom.
As the day wears on, dump trucks and heavy equipment haul tons of debris from the toppled Twin Towers. Emotions grow taut. Exhausted New York City firefighters scouring the World Trade Center wreckage for victims, including hundreds of their colleagues missing, presumed dead.
We were there till 3 o'clock in the morning, but it's like Planet of the Apes. You got 200 guys dead. Whoever did it, they should kill the bastards that did it, period.
What does it do to you knowing that there's 200 of your brothers dead under there?
There's 200 guys. The guy that relieved me is dead. No, I can't do it.
New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, conflicting earlier accounts, says only 4 people have been pulled from the rubble alive. 2 police officers.
Are all over the state. In North Miami Beach. The Coral Springs location, which is not too far from Fort Lauderdale, community there, where it's believed that Mohammed Atta may have lived at one point. The FBI went over there today. They came out with several bags of evidence, but we don't really know. As they came out, they said, really, no comment, nothing we can say. The FBI has been serving search warrants all over the state, but one place that they've really been focusing is in Venice, Florida. That's on the Gulf Coast near the Sarasota area.
Yeah.
And in Venice, Florida, they've been looking at the Venice Flying School because they believe, and records seem to support this, because I spoke to the folks who are the administrators at the Venice Flying School, that Mohammed Atta and a cousin, Marwan al-Shahi, both attended the school there going in July of last year. And they came in, they didn't even know how to fly a plane. They got their private pilot's license, then they continued to take classes there, and they finally got their commercial rating so that they were able to, and I spoke to the FAA's designated pilot examiner, who told us that they actually finished up with a Seneca, which is a 2-engine plane that they were able to demonstrate they could fly. They went up on 3 separate flights, each time a different, individually. After they spent the time up there, they were signed off, they got their certificates. Now, the jump is, where did they learn to go from a twin-engine plane to actually controlling something big like a 757 and a 767? And I think we're going to find there's a differing opinions on this, because I spoke to Dave, I'm going to look up his name here. I've spoken to so many people today. Dave Whitman. Dave Whitman is actually the one who is the designated pilot examiner. He's the one that the FAA contracts to take these people up. I said, could these guys fly a 757 after spending time doing just these smaller planes? Clearly, he says they couldn't take off, they couldn't land. It's just way too complicated. He goes, but could they jump into the seat, take the controls, and then target the plane into something like the World Trade Centers? And he says, yes, they could do that. You're going to hear from some commercial pilots who will say, I don't think that's quite possible, and I'm not sure we're ever really going to get a clear answer on that. There's a lot involved to flying a jet. Clearly, the people who get in there, anybody who sticks their head in there can tell. Just look at all the buttons and all the things that are there. I mean, you can't just jump in and do it, but generally the belief was, at least from Dave Whitman, who does and he's a longtime pilot, former commercial pilot, he says they could have probably jumped in there.
What kind of document, Kerry, what kind of documents do these guys have? Does anybody check to see if they're residents, if they got green cards, if they've been here for a while, have they been students, that kind of thing?
You know, it's a good question, and they don't know. The FBI is trying to find that out. But one thing that's interesting, and I think we're going to hear from Rudy Deckers in a little bit here. Rudy Deckers is the owner of the Venice Flying School. Rudy has a lot of foreign students who come in. It's not unusual for people from other parts of the world coming to Florida to learn to fly because it's great weather. You don't have the weather delays. You're in class every day. You're up in the air every day. And it's also flat, so you don't have to worry about mountains and other obstacles as you're up there flying around. Rudy told us earlier today that these guys were clean, that, you know, as long as they were seemingly acceptable, it was just business to him. But he also said he always thought there was something unusual about their papers, but it wasn't really his job to check it out. And I know you're going to talk to him in a minute, so maybe he can talk a little bit more about that. We did speak to somebody at the school today, Ali Azan. He's in his early 20s. He's from Oman. He said he got to know these guys sort of socially. I mean, they speak the same language. They went out occasionally. And he said sometimes the conversation would digress into politics, and it would get to rather heated arguments. And he says that Mohammed Atta and his cousin never really spoke about hatred towards the United States, but did clearly talk about their hatred to Israel. Now, the counter-terrorist experts here at the FBI say that they were looking through the passenger manifest, and the reason they zeroed in on Mohammed Atta's name is because they had seen it before. He was suspected in a bus bombing in Israel back in 1986. So they saw that name and they go, oh, wait a second here, and that's where it all sort of connected together.
Well, how the hell did he get in the United States? If he's a
that's a really
terrorist.
good question, and I think a lot of people are looking for that.
Well, you would like to think that the FBI was one of the people looking at why he got in here before he did get in here. Anyway, tying him to the terrorism yesterday is what? What's just to make that clear to the audience? What ties these two fellows?
His name is on the passenger manifest. He was on one of the planes, and I'm not sure which exact plane he was on, but he was on one of the planes, and that's the general belief.
Okay, that's him. We've nailed him.
Yeah.
Okay. Kerry Sanders, thanks very much for joining us. By the way, as I speak right now, Penn Station in New York, as well as the Empire State Building, have been evacuated because of a bomb scare. We're looking at a picture right now. Joining us right now from Fort Myers, Florida, is Rudy Deckers. He's the president of Huffman Aviation, which runs a flight school where 2 of the suspected terrorists trained. Rudy, thanks for joining us on the phone there now. Let me ask you, were you suspicious of these guys?
No, of course not. We had no suspicion with all my 48 employees that these people had any thoughts other than become a professional pilot in their own country. That was what they told us.
Did they say they wanted to be commercial airline pilots or just sort of amateur guys driving, or perhaps executive flyers flying a businessmen around? Did they talk about big planes?
I myself talked a few moments with Atta, the smaller guy, a little longer with the big guy. My understanding was that they came over to be a professional pilot to go back to their own country to fly commercial airlines.
To fly big planes?
That was what they told us.
Did they say they were going to fly big planes like the ones they used yesterday to attack the World Trade Center?
90% of my people who are flying with us, they want to be a professional pilot. They don't want to be a professional pilot in a Cessna 172. They want to fly big planes. When they come over for training, we train them only in small planes. As I learned today from the media, that in November, when these 2 students took their test with Whitman, as you mentioned before, the FAA designator examiner, they went to another flight school to obtain a jet experience. We do not train for jets. We only train for small aircraft. There is, in my opinion, no way, and I only fly 20 years, no way that these boys, animals as I call them today the whole day, could have flown a jet. I have seen what the jets did. They changed their route and they did a 90-degree to the left turn. I don't think it's possible. I know one thing that I learned today. They left after our school with a basic license, starting to learn to fly. They flew with another flight school for jet training. And they had to have other training to get knowledge about the airline planes.
Where do you believe they took their second level training fly when they learned to fly jets? Where was that?
I have heard today that there's a company in Pompano Beach, Florida, Pompano Beach Jet Center. It has not been confirmed. I have learned today a lot more about these 2 students than I ever knew before. I do 300-400 students through Huffman Aviation. I own another flight school in Naples. We do more students in Naples than in Venice. Most of them are foreigners, 60-70%. When the students are done with their course, whatever course they take, private or commercial or multi-engine, when they leave us, we don't know where they go. There's no reasons for us to check that out. And I want to say one thing, what you mentioned before, how to get they in the States. When these people came in, they came in through the front door and they were already at a flight school in the United States. Apparently they were not happy and told my student coordinator that they wanted to go from one school to the other. I don't know why they left the other school. One of the 2 had a license, but they ended up at Huffman Aviation. And
were they here on student? Were they here, Rudy, on student visas, or what kind of documentation did they have? Did they present to you, or did they not present any documentation?
I personally don't know that due to the fact that I have people taking care of several jobs. My student coordinator who took them in took copies of their passports, what they don't need to do. We're not required when you walk into the store to get copies of your passports. The federal agents were.
Well, let me ask you for something else you wouldn't be responsible to. Let me ask you again about the question of whether they expressed any political views that aroused anybody's interest during the time they were your students at the flight school.
No, after this morning, 7 o'clock, when I was notified that my school was involved with maybe training people on the hijacked planes, I talked to all the people who were involved, everybody who knew these guys. Nobody ever had any clue that they were doing or preparing for actions what they did. Obvious, if we would had known everything, we would call the authorities.
Well, you were in a tough situation. I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight on MSNBC.
Well, I want to say one more thing, please. That's important for the flight school. We do not train people for these jets. We train people for 172s, small twin engines, and they go to other schools for other training.
I understand completely. You were very clear tonight, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Deckers. More information coming in right now. NBC News has learned just now the New York City police have mobilized at the Empire State Building. We're looking at it now. and the Empire State Building, along with New York's Pennsylvania Station, have both been evacuated. Very familiar buildings in New York, in the New York skyline. Police say a bomb-sniffing dog responded positively, so it's not just a hoax. Anyway, NBC's Pete Williams has more on the investigation. Pete?
Chris, good day to you. It's come a long way in just the few hours since the attack. It's really an investigation that has proceeded at a pace that federal investigators say is far beyond where they thought they would be. Here's where we are tonight. We know that there were 12 to 24 hijackers totally involved on those 4 planes, 3 to 6 hijackers on each plane, the Justice Department says. Federal investigators now believe they know the names of most of the hijackers. They are now in the process of serving search warrants in at least 6 states, probably almost a dozen searches conducted today in Florida, in New York, in New Jersey, in Massachusetts, in Maine, and in Pennsylvania, looking either for places where these suspected hijackers lived, where they studied, for example, the flight school. You were just interviewing an official from there. At least one other flight school in another state, we're told, the FBI is interested in, although they are not saying precisely where that was. They are also interviewing witnesses, the people who received the cell phone calls from the people on board these doomed airliners, and they are looking into just about every form of documentary evidence that you can examine. The most promising of which is, of course, the passenger lists, the so-called manifests that record the name of each person that boards a flight. Those have been the most productive things. But they're discovering, for example, that these suspected hijackers bought their tickets with a combination of cash and credit cards, and also used credit cards in part to pay for hotel rooms, and also possibly to rent cars. So there is no shortage of leads for investigators to follow. At least, probably at this point, 8,000 FBI agents and support personnel and investigators from other federal agencies, including the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the Customs Service, and so forth, all very much involved in this investigation. The Attorney General says tonight they're chasing down at least 2,000 separate leads. And this is not the kind of thing where an investigation gets sort of stuck in the mud and people are calling in all sorts of leads and investigators have to chase them all down, not having any idea whether they're productive or not. Quite the opposite. An investigation that they say is no shortage of very productive, very promising leads. For example, the car discovered in the Boston airport parking garage. They find the registration. That's what led them to the Florida flight school. That is the kind of very solid evidence, Chris, that they say they have.
Well, let me ask you, it's a tough question, but if the FBI is so fast at rounding up the usual suspects, doesn't
these are not the usual suspects by any means.
But they were able to get these guys so fast and identify them by name. How come we don't have a system of trying to check names before they get on planes if the names jump out at the FBI so quickly like that?
Well, 2 things. First of all, there is a system, the so-called terror watch list, that checks for names of suspected terrorists, especially when they enter the United States. You'd have to ask Robert Hager whether that watch list checks the names of anyone who makes a reservation for a domestic airplane. I don't know that. But the reason they have gotten to these people quickly is by simply looking at the passenger lists and then comparing that, not just names that jump out at you, but comparing those passenger lists to, as you say, known terrorist groups. And at least there have been a couple of hits like that.
Well, what about
but also then looking for people who are registered in hotels, in the areas where the planes took off. The rental car, for example, that was simply a lucky break. A man walks into the Florida airport, sees the coverage on television, says, you know, I got into an altercation with 2 people that were told he said look Arabic. He tells the police, they get on he describes the car, they get the car, they do the search, that kind of thing.
Well, in other words, we're profiling after the fact, but we don't do it before the fact.
Well, this isn't profiling. I understand your question, but this isn't profiling. This is going back now and trying to trace their movements. Who are these people? But your question is a different one, not for the FBI, but possibly for the FAA, which is there a good way to pick up suspected terrorists when they get on a plane? But question, should it be illegal for a suspected terrorist to get on an airplane? That's beyond my ken.
Please stand by, Pete Williams. We're going right now to Stone Phillips of NBC News, who's at Penn Station. What's happening there, Stone?
Police emergency units are making their way to the Empire State Building, where just a few minutes ago, a bomb-sniffing dog gave a positive read on a package inside the building. I'm standing at 7th Avenue and 34th Street, about 2 blocks away. I can see the Empire State Building from where I'm talking to you on a cell phone right now. And there has been no explosion of any kind. This is a response to find out more about that package. It was a positive read from a bomb-sniffing dog. Bomb units have responded, we are being told, and the whole area here has been evacuated for several blocks around the Empire State Building. That's what we know at this point.
Is there a separate bomb or any separate indication of trouble at Penn Station, which is so close to the Empire State Building?
No, I'm standing right in front of Penn Station, and people are standing here. We've been evacuated to this point. So the concern right now is the Empire State Building, and numerous police units from all directions have converged on the Empire State Building at 34th Street and 5th Avenue, and presumably they are in now trying to figure out what's inside that package.
Was there any warning or any notification to the police that there was going to be a bomb in that building?
I don't think so. I don't know for sure whether this was a routine exit. We're being moved even as we speak right here, further away. Whether this was a routine check of the building or whether some kind of a threat or tip had been called in.
Let me ask you this. Is there any reason to believe that this is connected to what happened yesterday?
I don't have anything to tell you about that, Chris. Police continue to move us back here.
Okay.
But as I can say, the tower of the Empire State Building is for the most part darkened. There are several lights in some of the windows, and police units have been moving in.
Okay, well, thank you, Stone Phillips of NBC News, who's at right near the Empire State Building. Pete Williams, let's go back to you for a second with some more information about what we know about these hijackers. The hijackers, the numbers have been estimated, you said somewhere between 12 and 24 parties. Do the police know, or rather the FBI know, who the people are who did not participate actively but were part of the plotting faction?
They think they're getting some good rundown on that. Not that they knew just simply from looking at the manifests, but now going back and saying, you know, did they use credit cards? Did they rent cars? Were other people involved in those transactions? So it's a financial thing in part. It's also any people that they were seen with, people that they would hang out with. That's the kind of thing they're doing now. They obviously are concerned that there are such people. They're concerned that there may be as many as, we've heard one person tell us that there may be as many as 50 people involved in this conspiracy, in addition to, if you assume the maximum number of hijackers, 24, that would leave several more people that they're concerned about. Obviously, that's why domestic airline flights haven't started yet. That's why the FBI is saying in these interagency discussions about how to restart domestic air travel that perhaps the government should reinstitute what was done years ago when we used to have the old sky marshal systems in the 1970s.
I understand. Is there
federal marshals would fly on planes.
Pete, does the FBI have any idea to what extent this cabal was hatched in the United States, and to what extent or what percentage of the people involved are in the U.S. now, and how many are back in perhaps Afghanistan?
No, they don't. They don't know. They're obviously checking the possibility that this could be related to the similar group of Algerian terrorists who apparently were trying to stage the millennial bombings. Right. There's an obvious connection there. They're investigating a report that a couple of these hijackers may have come into the United States a few days before the terrorist attack, crossing in from Canada. They're looking for information about that now. But they don't have a firm read on that at this point.
What about the three Middle Eastern or Mid-Eastern gentlemen? They were described as Mid-Eastern men who attempted to board a plane at JFK yesterday morning at exactly the same time as the other people were boarding planes in Dulles, at Dulles Airport and at Boston's Logan Airport in Boston.
Yes, just about that time. I've heard that report that 3 people were having an argument with the ticket agent, we were told.
Right.
Then the Port Authority police were called, and by the time the police got there, the 3 men supposedly were nowhere to be found. We've asked federal agents about that, but I haven't found anyone who believes that is the case.
Is there anything in the electronic communication from the plane that was downed in Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh that would tell us what happened to that plane? We've heard suggestions tonight that it may be heroic efforts by the passengers to subdue the hijackers. What do you know from the FBI on that front?
Not much. At this point, that is an FAA investigation, and I'm sorry to give you that kind of a jurisdictional answer.
It's a good answer.
With all this work to do, they do tend to to sort it out that way, and it's the FAA that's trying to sort those communications and look for the black boxes.
Thank you very much. Pete Williams of NBC News. Let's go right now to NBC News' Monica Novotny. She's up on Broadway and 29th Street, just blocks from the Empire State and from Penn Station. Monica, those police dogs, they've made us sniff. Any further development? They've sniffed the bomb somewhere.
Yeah, Chris, you know, we are here on the streets, and their police will not talk to us. They simply are saying this is an ongoing investigation, but I can tell you that whatever is happening over at the Empire State Building, they're taking it very seriously. There are literally hundreds of people in the streets. As we approach, we started seeing people heading southward, and they continue to do so. Some people have suitcases, people have bags, they're clutching each other. I see entire families. I'm looking at a father right now holding his young child. It looks like an older brother is consoling that child. People are very upset. They're very nervous. We have a clear shot of the top of the Empire State Building from where I'm standing, the top half of the building. And all I can see right now is there are a few lights throughout the building, but the top of the building is not lit up. I don't know if that was already set for this evening. Typically, as a New Yorker, we do see that lit up in various colors. It is not lit at this point. There's also a lot of smoke in the air. That is not coming from the building, though, but it may be adding a little bit to this sense of there is a little bit of a feeling of panic here because as people are running, they're very concerned. That smoke, though, we assume is from downtown.
Do you know anything about a tip? How did the police know to bring the dogs in?
Chris, we literally just got here. We were over at Bellevue covering the situation there. We crossed town immediately when we heard this was happening. And as we've tried to speak to the officers, they have nothing to say to us. They're very serious about getting the people out of the area, which they seem to be doing. I'm not sure if they've evacuated other buildings in the area. What's interesting is that there are so many people here, and I have seen several people with bags with some belongings that they're taking. Looks like people have grabbed some clothes. So I wonder if they haven't actually also evacuated some surrounding buildings. I'm speculating only because, as I say, some of the things that I'm seeing people carrying with them, it's not something that people walking through Times Square would have. And as I look up directly up Broadway, I also have a clear shot of Times Square. I see traffic moving through Times Square. But again, the police lights are going all the way up Broadway, and the streets are filled with people that are being pushed southward.
We'll be back to you later, but let me ask you about Bellevue. What is it like in there? I have an image of a kind of a World War II situation. Is it just out of hand, or what? Is it under control? How many people are in that hospital right now from the World Trade Towers yesterday?
Chris, actually, that's what most people expected. That's what we expected it to be, and all of the doctors I spoke to told me that's what they expected today. But in fact, it is almost eerie, the silence in that hospital. It's a busy hospital because it's always busy, so it's functioning. There are people passing through, but they only had about 40 patients left that were actually still in the hospital that had come from the World Trade Center. And for the most part, the injuries were not that serious. They had handled about almost 80 actually firefighters, 30 policemen or so. They had close to 300 people that had come through, but again, only 40 left. The scene was very quiet. I spent a lot of time with one of the doctors there today, and she told me that she'd also spent time at Chelsea Piers and she'd been downtown, and she said what's the most eerie for these doctors is that they were really expecting by this point to be barraged by thousands of victims needing help, and she said it is. Again, I use the word eerie because that's how she continued to describe it to me, that it is Monica. So silent.
Monica, thank you very much. Monica Novotny with NBC News. Let's go to Howard Feynman, who's sitting with me right now. Howard, let's go to the big picture. United States government. How's the president responding to this horror?
Today he used the phrase acts of war. War has been the word of the day. It was the reality of yesterday because we saw the acts of war live on television. Today, it's the word and the legal and diplomatic and military meaning thereof that's being discussed behind closed doors at the White House and on Capitol Hill now.
Which suggests action on a broad front.
Action on a broad front with a broad philosophical and diplomatic frame around it. These are not truly faceless, mysterious enemies we are facing. These are radical, fundamentalist, Islamic terrorists. And the question is the extent to which this country and this capital is willing to declare war, not just on a few people, but on a way of life that's aimed to destroy the United States. That is a very, very big thing, and there's going to have to be a discussion of it. What will happen is that the president will act first.
First of all, I can't tell you how sad I am and America is for the people of New York City and the tri-state area.
want to let you know there's a quiet anger in America that really is real. And also, though, I can't tell you how proud I am of the good citizens of your part of the world and the extraordinary job you all are doing. You're doing really a great job on behalf of the citizens of New York City, New York State, and in the tri-state area. So I want to thank you very much for your leadership and dedication.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Secondly, I've been in touch with you all, and you've extended me a kind invitation to come to New York City. I accept. I'll be there tomorrow afternoon after the prayer service at the National Cathedral. I look forward to joining with both of you in thanking the police and fire, the construction trade workers, the restaurant owners, the volunteers, all of whom have really made a huge display for the world to see of the compassion of America and the bravery of America and the strength of America. Every world leader I've talked to in recent days has been impressed by what they have seen about our nation and the fabric of our nation. And I want to thank everybody when I come. So thank you for your hospitality.
Well, Mr. President, thank you for coming to New York. I'm sure that's going to be a great inspiration to all of us, and particularly those thousands of men and women still downtown trying to help us with the rescue efforts. I also want to thank you for all the help we've gotten from the federal government. It's been tremendous, and for your words. You are right. Our nation is united as never before, and we will triumph over this evil with your leadership and your inspiration. And I also have to congratulate the mayor for the tremendous effort he has made. Mr. President, you would be proud of the leadership and the cooperation we've seen here. The city has taken the lead. Your people have been enormously supportive, and we're very grateful.
Well, thanks, George and Rudy. Thank you all. I know you've put in a request, and I've directed the Attorney General to expedite any payments of benefits for those fallen public safety officers to their families, any benefits to their families. And the Attorney General, as I understand, will be making a formal announcement of your request today. I've told Allbaugh anything it takes to help New York. I have been in touch with the Congress. They are expediting a supplemental. We've got great cooperation with members of the Congress in both political parties. So just keep in touch. I know you will. This isn't the first time we've talked, and I really appreciate the fact that you all are in charge. And I know the citizens of New York and the tri-state area, people of New Jersey and Connecticut, are appreciative as well.
President, the uniformed officers, the police, the fire, the emergency service officers, their families will really appreciate this. We're going to sustain a tremendous loss of our bravest and our best people. And the relief that you're now making available to the families is going to mean a lot to them. They're going to be able to think about the fact that their children are going to be taken care of, that they're going to be able to go to college, that they're going to be able to carry on. So I can't express to you how appreciative we are of your acting so swiftly. And also, on that terrible day when our city was being attacked, you were in immediate communication with us, Mr. President, and helped to secure the city. And the work you've done for us, we all eternally appreciate. You've been a terrific leader, and we're taking direction from you, and we're following your example. You've done a terrific job, Mr. President.
Well, thanks, Rudy, and thanks, George. Let me make it clear to you all, as my close friends, that my mindset is this. One, I'm weep and mourn with America. I'm going to a hospital right after this to comfort families. I wish I could comfort every single family whose lives have been affected. But make no mistake about it, my resolve is steady and strong about winning this war that has been declared on America. It's a new kind of war. And I understand it's a new kind of war. And this government will adjust. And this government will call others to join us to make sure this act, these acts, the people who conducted these acts and those who harbor them are held accountable accountable for their actions. Make no mistake. And as we do so, I urge, I know I don't need to tell you all this, but our nation must be mindful that there are thousands of Arab Americans who live in New York City who love their flag just as much as the three of us do. And we must be mindful that as we seek to win the war, that we treat Arab Americans and Muslims with the respect they deserve. I know that is your attitudes as well, certainly the attitude of this government, that we should not hold one who is a Muslim responsible for an act of terror. We will hold those who are responsible for the terrorist acts accountable and those who harbor them. You'll see, and I look forward to visiting with you in person tomorrow about the resolve of this government. And so I thank you very much for your leadership on the ground. I wish I was visiting under better circumstances, but it will be a chance for all three of us to thank and hug and cry with the citizens of your good area.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We really appreciate this very much.
We'll see you tomorrow.
President, we're looking forward to your visit. It will inspire us all, and we will be with you when the United States takes firm and appropriate action to those who conducted this evil.
Thank you all very much. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
God bless.
Mr. President.
Bye.
Mr. President, is it safe to fly, just specifically, would you want a close member of your family to get on a commercial air flight today?
We have taken every precaution to make sure that it is safe to fly in America. There are beefed up security at our airports. There's increased presence on the airplanes. Yes, I would, if a family member asked whether they should fly, I'd say yes.
Mr. President, how close are you, sir, to finding out, to nailing down who is responsible for these acts? And what kind of international coalition are you trying to build? Is it similar to the one your father built for the Persian Gulf War?
I am, first let me condition the press this way. Any sources and methods of intelligence will remain guarded in secret. My administration will not talk about how we gather intelligence, if we gather intelligence, and what the intelligence says. That's for the protection of the American people. It is important as we battle this enemy, we conduct ourselves that way. Secondly, I've been on the phone this morning, just like I was yesterday, and will be on this afternoon on the phone with leaders from around the world who express their solidarity with this nation's intention to rout out and to whip terrorism. They understand, fully understand, that that an act of war was declared on the United States of America. They understand as well that that act could have easily been declared on them. These people can't stand freedom. They hate our values. They hate what America stands for. Many of the leaders understand it could have easily have happened to them. Secondly, they understand that unlike previous war, this enemy likes to hide. They heard my call loud and clear to those who feel like they can provide safe harbor for the terrorists, that we will hold them responsible as well. And they join me in understanding not only the concept of...
Ordered Marine One and is preparing to tour the damage around the World Trade Center. The president was greeted upon his arrival just moments ago by Governor Pataki of New York and Mayor Giuliani. The three men were casually dressed, all wearing steamer jackets, windbreakers, and hats. The three men embraced as Mr. Bush got off the plane. Mr. Bush has had a sullen look on his face since emerging before reporters after the service at National Cathedral. Again, if it's difficult to hear, the helicopter is about to take off now. just 3 days after Air Force One was designated a target by the Secret Service, the security was again extraordinary today. When reporters arrived at Andrews Air Force Base outside Washington, 2 fighter jets were visible patrolling the skies overhead, just as the President's helicopter, Marine One, approached Andrews Air Force Base. The flight over, again, a reminder of how tense the Secret Service is about the President's security, as again a fighter jet was visible within 1 to 2 miles off the right wing of Air Force One, presumably another jet off the left wing as well. The President traveled on Air Force One with a congressional delegation from the tri-state area, and on board with him 9 members of that delegation, including Senators Clinton and Schumer of New York. The President now proceeding to the World Trade Center, and will report later once he gets on the ground after his aerial tour. This is David Duggar reporting with the President in New Jersey.
And that's the full report with the kind of detail that other reporters, which is where that report goes to, want to hear, including what people are wearing.
His experience, but his videotape speaks for him.
Get the 4-9 battalion, you know. You need anybody with emergency medical experience?
My estimate is we probably lost 200 firefighters.
Oh my God.
God knows how many thousands of people.
Okay. So you want me to wait right here? Okay.
Comfortable spot. Okay. And stay away from any other high-rise building. Okay. Not too much.
Look out. I live. I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. I just buried him sick. I'm sorry I came down. I just had to help you, but I should have known a second moment ago. Thank God. It is black as night and I'm outside in broad daylight. I just came and got down behind a car. You know, I can see a tiny bit. This is incredible. Okay, I had to go find people who need help. I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Can I get a toot? I'm seeing a couple of clean breaths. That's good. Okay. Back to you. There's all these noises. I don't know what it is. They say someone needs help.
Yeah, Mike! Hey, Mike! Come over here! Are you okay? Yeah!
Anybody need a doctor?
Who are you?
Don't have oxygen. Hello, Doc. Hey, that guy needs some oxygen if someone can share it with him. 10-4. Thanks.
Dr. Mark Heath spent the next several hours alongside hundreds of other volunteer medics caring for the wounded. Disturbing pictures. We also have some other news to tell you about. It comes from Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C. We have pictures of planes taking off. They're allowing planes to take off without passengers, so
this in itself a demonstration to the world that in times of adversity, the political establishment is one.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. President pro tempore, members of Congress, and fellow Americans. In the normal course of events, presidents come to this chamber to report on the State of the Union. Tonight, no such report is needed. It has already been delivered by the American people. We have seen it in the courage of passengers who rushed terrorists to save others on the ground. Passengers like an exceptional man named Todd Beamer. And would you please help me welcome his wife, Lisa Beamer, here tonight.
Mrs. Beamer, who's pregnant, said her new child would know about the father's bravery. How strong.
We have seen the state of our union in the endurance of rescuers working past exhaustion. We've seen the unfurling of flags, the lighting of candles, the giving of blood, the saying of prayers in English, Hebrew, and Arabic. We have seen the decency of a loving and giving people who have made the grief of strangers their own. My fellow citizens, for the last 9 days, the entire world has seen for itself the state of our union, and it is strong. Tonight we are a country awakened to danger and called to defend freedom. Our grief has turned to anger, and anger to resolution. Whether we bring our enemies to justice or bring justice to our enemies, justice will be done. I thank the Congress for its leadership at such an important time. All of America was touched on the evening of the tragedy to see Republicans and Democrats join together on the steps of this Capitol, singing God Bless America. And you did more than sing. You acted by delivering $40 billion to rebuild our communities and meet the needs of our military. Speaker Hassert, Minority Leader Gephardt, Majority Leader Daschle, and Senator Lott, I thank you for your friendship, for your leadership, and for your service to our country. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the world for its outpouring of support. America will never forget the sounds of our national anthem playing at Buckingham Palace, on the streets of Paris, and at Berlin's Brandenburg Gate. We will not forget South Korean children gathering to pray outside our embassy in Seoul, or the prayers of sympathy offered at a mosque in Cairo. We will not forget moments of silence and days of mourning in Australia and Africa and Latin America. Nor will we forget the citizens of 80 other nations who died with our own. Dozens of Pakistanis, more than 130 Israelis, more than 250 citizens of India, men and women from El Salvador, Iran, Mexico, and Japan, and hundreds of British citizens. America has no truer friend than Great Britain. Once again, we are joined together in a great cause. So honored that the British Prime Minister has crossed an ocean to show his unity with America. Thank you for coming, friend. On September the 11th, enemies of freedom committed an act of war against our country. Americans have known wars, but for the past 136 years, they have been wars on foreign soil, except for one Sunday in 1941. Americans have known the casualties of war, but not at the center of a great city on a peaceful morning. Americans have known surprise attacks, but never before on thousands of civilians. All of this was brought upon us in a single day, and night fell on a different world, a world where freedom itself is under attack. Americans have many questions tonight. Americans are asking, who attacked our country? The evidence we have gathered all points to a collection of loosely affiliated terrorist organizations known as Al-Qaeda. They are some of the murderers indicted for bombing American embassies in Tanzania and Kenya and responsible for bombing the USS Cole. Al-Qaeda is to terror what the mafia is to crime, but its goal is not making money. Its goal is remaking the world and imposing its radical beliefs on people everywhere. The terrorists practice a fringe form of Islamic extremism that has been rejected by Muslim scholars and the vast majority of Muslim clerics, a fringe movement that perverts the peaceful teaching of Islam. The terrorist directive commands them to kill Christians and Jews, to kill all Americans, and make no distinctions among military and civilians, including women and children. This group and its leader, a person named Osama bin Laden, are linked to many other organizations in different countries, including the Egyptian Islamic Jihad and the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan. There are thousands of these terrorists in more than 60 countries. They are recruited from their own nations and neighborhoods and brought to camps in places like Afghanistan, where they are trained in the tactics of terror. They are sent back to their homes or sent to hide in countries around the world to plot evil and destruction. The leadership of Al-Qaeda has great influence in Afghanistan and supports the Taliban regime in controlling most of that country. In Afghanistan, we see Al-Qaeda's vision for the world. Afghanistan's people have been brutalized. Many are starving, and many have fled. Women are not allowed to attend school. You can be jailed for owning a television. Religion can be practiced only as their leaders dictate. A man can be jailed in Afghanistan if his beard is not long enough. The United States respects the people of Afghanistan. After all, we are currently its largest source of humanitarian aid, but we condemn the Taliban regime. It is not only repressing its own people, it is threatening people everywhere by sponsoring and sheltering and supplying terrorists. By aiding and abetting murder, the Taliban regime is committing murder. And tonight, the United States of America makes the following demands on the Taliban. Deliver to United States authorities all the leaders of al-Qaeda who hide in your land. Release all foreign nationals, including American citizens you have unjustly imprisoned. Protect foreign journalists, diplomats, and aid workers in your country. Close immediately and permanently every terrorist training camp in Afghanistan, and hand over every terrorist and every person in their support structure to appropriate authorities. Give the United States full access to terrorist training camps so we can make sure they are no longer operating. These demands are not open to negotiation or discussion. The Taliban must act, and act immediately. They will hand over the terrorists, or they will share in their fate. I also want to speak tonight directly to Muslims throughout the world. We respect your faith. It's practiced freely by many millions of Americans, and by millions more in countries that America counts as friends. Its teachings are good and peaceful. And those who commit evil in the name of Allah blaspheme the name of Allah. The terrorists are traitors to their own faith, trying in effect to hijack Islam itself. The enemy of America is not our many Muslim friends. It is not our many Arab friends. Our enemy is a radical network of terrorists and every government that supports them. Our war on terror begins with al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated. Americans are asking, why do they hate us? They hate what they see right here in this chamber, a democratically elected government. Their leaders are self-appointed. They hate our freedoms. our freedom of religion, our freedom of speech, our freedom to vote and assemble and disagree with each other. They want to overthrow existing governments in many Muslim countries, such as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. They want to drive Israel out of the Middle East. They want to drive Christians and Jews out of vast regions of Asia and Africa. These terrorists kill not merely to end lives, but to disrupt and end a way of life. With every atrocity, they hope that America grows fearful, retreating from the world and forsaking our friends. They stand against us because we stand in their way. We're not deceived by their pretenses to piety. We have seen their kind before. They are the heirs of all the murderous ideologies of the 20th century. By sacrificing human life to serve their radical visions, by abandoning every value except the will to power, they follow in the path of fascism, Nazism, and totalitarianism. And they will follow that path all the way to where it ends, in history's unmarked grave of discarded lies. Americans are asking, how will we fight and win this war? We will direct every resource at our command, every means of diplomacy, every tool of intelligence, every instrument of law enforcement, every financial influence, and every necessary weapon of war to the disruption and to the defeat of the global terror network. Now, this war will not be like the war against Iraq a decade ago, with a decisive liberation of territory and a swift conclusion. It will not look like the air war above Kosovo 2 years ago, where no ground troops were used and not a single American was lost in combat. Our response involves far more than instant retaliation and isolated strikes. Americans should not expect one battle, but a lengthy campaign, unlike any other we have ever seen. It may include dramatic strikes, visible on TV, and covert operations, secret even in success. We will starve terrorists of funding, turn them one against another, drive them from place to place, until there is no refuge or no rest. And we will pursue nations that provide aid or safe haven to terrorism. Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists. From this day forward, any nation that continues to harbor or support terrorism will be regarded by the United States as a hostile regime. Our nation has been put on notice. We're not immune from attack. We will take defensive measures against terrorism to protect Americans. Today, dozens of federal departments and agencies, as well as state and local governments, have responsibilities affecting homeland security. These efforts must be coordinated at the highest level. So tonight I announce the creation of a cabinet-level position reporting directly to me, the Office of Homeland Security. And tonight I also announce a distinguished American to lead this effort to strengthen American security, a military veteran, an effective governor, a true patriot, a trusted friend, Pennsylvania's Tom Ridge. He will lead, oversee, and coordinate a comprehensive national strategy to safeguard our country against terrorism and respond to any attacks that may come. These measures are essential. The only way to defeat terrorism as a threat to our way of life is to stop it, eliminate it, and destroy it where it grows. Many will be involved in this effort, from FBI agents to intelligence operatives to the reservists we have called to active duty. All deserve our thanks, and all have our prayers. And tonight, a few miles from the damaged Pentagon, I have a message for our military. Be ready. I've called the armed forces to alert, and there is a reason. The hour is coming when America will act, and you will make us proud. This is not, however, just America's fight. And what is at stake is not just America's freedom. This is the world's fight. This is civilization's fight. This is the fight of all who believe in progress and pluralism, tolerance and freedom. We ask every nation to join us. We will ask and we will need the help of police forces, intelligence service, and banking systems around the world. The United States is grateful that many nations and many international organizations have already responded with sympathy and with support. Nations from Latin America to Asia to Africa to Europe to the Islamic world. Perhaps the NATO Charter reflects best the attitude of the world. An attack on one is an attack on all. The civilized world is rallying to America's side. They understand that if this terror goes unpunished, their own cities, their own citizens may be next. Terror unanswered can not only bring down buildings, it can threaten the stability of legitimate governments. And you know what? We're not going to allow it. Americans are asking what is expected of us. I ask you to live your lives and hug your children. I know many citizens have fears tonight, and I ask you to be calm and resolute, even in the face of a continuing threat. I ask you to uphold the values of America and remember why so many have come here. We're in a fight for our principles, and our first responsibility is to live by them. No one should be singled out for unfair treatment or unkind words because of their ethnic background or religious faith. I ask you to continue to support the victims of this tragedy with your contributions. Those who want to give can go to a central source of information, libertyunites.org, to find the names of groups providing direct help in New York, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. The thousands of FBI agents who are now at work in this investigation may need your cooperation, and I ask you to give it. I ask for your patience with the delays and inconveniences that may accompany tighter security, and for your patience in what will be a long struggle. I ask your continued participation and confidence in the American economy. Terrorists attacked a symbol of American prosperity. They did not touch its source. America is successful because of the hard work and creativity and enterprise of our people. These were the true strengths of our economy before September 11th, and they are our strengths today. And finally, please continue praying for the victims of terror and their families, for those in uniform, and for our great country. Prayer has comforted us in sorrow and will help strengthen us for the journey ahead. Tonight, I thank my fellow Americans for what you have already done and for what you will do. And ladies and gentlemen of the Congress, I thank you, their representatives, for what you have already done and for what we will do together. Tonight, we face new and sudden national challenges. We will come together to improve air safety, to dramatically expand the number of air marshals on domestic flights, and take new measures to prevent hijacking. We will come together to promote stability and keep our airlines flying with direct assistance during this emergency. We will come together to give law enforcement the additional tools it needs to track down terror here at home. We will come together to strengthen our intelligence capabilities to know the plans of terrorists before they act and to find them before they strike. We will come together to take active steps that strengthen America's economy and put our people back to work. Tonight we welcome two leaders who embody the extraordinary spirit of all New Yorkers, Governor George Pataki and Mayor Rudolph Giuliani. As a symbol of America's resolve, my administration will work with Congress and these two leaders to show the world that we will rebuild New York City. After all that has just passed, all the lives taken and all the possibilities and hopes that died with them, it is natural to wonder if America's future is one of fear. Some speak of an age of terror. I know there are struggles ahead and dangers to face. But this country will define our times, not be defined by them. As long as the United States of America is determined and strong, this will not be an age of terror. This will be an age of liberty here and across the world. Great harm has been done to us. We have suffered great loss. And in our grief and anger, we have found our mission and our moment. Freedom and fear are at war. The advance of human freedom, the great achievement of our time and the great hope of every time, now depends on us. Our nation, this generation, will lift a dark thread of violence from our people and our future. We will rally the world to this cause by our efforts, by our courage. We will not tire, we will not falter, and we will not fail. It is my hope that in the months and years ahead, life will return almost to normal. We'll go back to our lives and routines, and that is good. Even grief recedes with time and grace. But our resolve must not pass. Each of us will remember what happened that day and to whom it happened. We'll remember the moment the news came, where we were, and what we were doing. Some will remember an image of a fire or a story of rescue. Some will carry memories of a face and a voice gone forever. And I will carry this. It is the police shield of a man named George Howard, who died at the World Trade Center trying to save others. It was given to me by his mom, Arlene, as a proud memorial to her son. It is my reminder of lives that ended in a task that does not end. I will not forget the wound to our country and those who inflicted it. I will not yield. I will not rest. I will not relent in waging this struggle for freedom and security for the American people. The course of this conflict is not known, yet its outcome is certain. Freedom and fear, justice and cruelty have always been at war. And we know that God is not neutral between them. Fellow citizens, we'll meet violence with patient justice, assured of the rightness of our cause, and confident of the victories to come. In all that lies before us, may God grant us wisdom, and may He watch over the United States of America. Thank you.
President of the United States warning the Taliban in Afghanistan that if they do not give up Osama bin Laden and all those who work with him, they will suffer the same fate. Telling the rest of the world that you either are with the United States and its allies, then you will be against the United States. Telling other nations that any one of them that continues to harbor or support terrorism will be regarded by the United States as hostile. Telling the United States military that the hour is coming when the United States will act and that they will make the country proud. As he speaks to the members of the Supreme Court, asking the country to uphold the values of America and remember why so many have come here. As he speaks to other important congressmen and senators on important committees dealing with this, he asks their continued participation and confidence in the American economy. And in naming tonight Tom Ridge, the governor of Pennsylvania, to head the Office of Homeland Security, reporting directly to the President, saying to the citizens of the United States that he will do whatever it takes to protect their safety. And saying that he and his administration, the country, and all law enforcement agencies in the country will come together to give law enforcement the additional tools it needs to track down terror at home. Whether the President said we bring our enemies to justice or bring justice to our enemies, justice will be done. I have several of my colleagues with me this evening and would like to hear their impressions of the speech. And I'm going to start with George Stephanopoulos.
Peter, the President asked the country to be calm and resolute, and tonight he led by example. He was resolved, he was reassuring, he was sober, he was strong, and to me, he's never seemed so convinced before, never seemed so convinced of his cause, or so convincing and deliberate. He described a war that will be long and difficult and different, but he also described a war that can be won, and I thought one of the interesting sentences in the speech was, he said this war will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated. That is an objective he can meet because, of course, of the qualification of global reach. To define the enemy, to define the goal.
The President comfortable with himself and with the country. In Washington, Cokie Roberts.
Peter, this is what we're seeing right now. The President walking out and shaking these hands. He came down, put his arm around Tom Daschle, the Senate Majority Leader, then made a point of walking down an aisle through the seats to greet Kwesi Nkrumah, a former member of Congress, now the head of the NAACP. This is a moment of unity that he has not had in his presidency, and the coming to the Congress created this for him. They've been talking it, but now we as Americans see it. And